community, and an important part of our ongoing school improvement work. We welcome feedback from all of our families to help us with those efforts. You can find survey links, passwords, and much, much more information at albanyschools.org. Paper copies of the survey in English and 5 additional language are also available at each school. Finally, a couple of reminders about next week. Next week, we have our Regent exams at Albany High. Exams will be given Tuesday through Friday. There will be no classes at Albany High on those days. Only students taking exams will need to report to school each day. All of our school offices and schools will be closed on Monday in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Our district will be participating in the New York State's Memorial Celebration at the Empire State Plaza Convention Center beginning at 9 a.m. Our Community Engagement Coordinator, Kathy Edmondson, will staff an informational table at the event, and I'm looking forward to attending as well. Before I welcome Albany School of Humanities Principal Marie Callahan, I would like to note that Ash is one of just 19 schools in New York that has become chosen to participate in the Project Fit America contest sponsored by ShopRite and Dannon. So, congratulations. If Ash is one of the top 4 online vote getters, the school receives up to $25,000 for state of the art outdoor and indoor fitness equipment. Voting begins Friday, February 1st and runs through February 25th. Last year's winners received an average of 300 votes a day, so we need everyone to be all in for Ash. Stay tuned for more information and remember that every vote counts. Now I will turn the program over to Principal Callahan to tell us more about the great things happening here at her school, and she is accompanied by the 6th grade leadership team. So I welcome them to the microphone.
Thank you to the Board of Education members, Superintendent Adam, and members of the Cabinet for allowing us to present our school this evening. And I just want to take a minute to introduce Ms. Irwin. She is our assistant principal here at ASH.
So our ASH mission statement here is we are a global family. We recognize our common humanity and respect and celebrate all cultures. We have a shared responsibility to protect our planet and create a more peaceful world. Our PBIS motto is ROAR, which is focused on our ROAR tickets that we give out for good behavior, and that stands for respect others and always be responsible and safe.
So I just wanted to quickly go over the demographics of the building here at ASH. There are 561 students in pre-K through 6th grade currently in our building. We have 29 classrooms, with 5 of them being self-contained classrooms. We are fortunate here at ASH and have many special area teachers, 2 PE, 1 art, 1 librarian, 1 music, 1 band, 1 orchestra, 1 theater arts teacher, and we have computer teaching assistant who runs computer classes for us full-time. Our student population is made up of 49% male, 51% female. Our students with disabilities is 13%, ENL is 4%, Black is 52%, Hispanic 18%, White 13%, Asian 7%, and multiracial 10%.
So next we'd like to highlight some of our progress toward our STEP plan this year. And we decided as a building that it was beneficial to group all of our activities into 3 main goals for the year. So our 3 goals are differentiation, parent engagement, and trauma-informed care.
So I'm just going to walk through the tenants, but then I'll talk to you briefly about the activities that we have aligned to each of those tenants. So for tenant 2, our goal is that by June 2019, 100% of our teachers will implement differentiation strategies as evidenced by walkthrough data, PD exit tickets, and evidence of planning to achieve a 5% increase on our NWA student growth percentiles for all of our subgroups. And so I just wanted to highlight a little bit about our progress with that. So we've been doing principal and administrative walkthroughs, and I've been focused here on differentiation when I'm doing those walkthroughs. And I've been fortunate because a lot of administrators within the district have come in and we've been doing a lot of paired walkthroughs so that I can get their feedback and we can have those tough conversations together. We're also closing that feedback loop with the teachers weekly now. So in our weekly minutes, we send them out on Friday evenings to the teachers, and we highlight all the good things that we've seen during our walkthroughs and areas that we need to keep working on and growing. We also set a professional development calendar for the whole school year. And last year when we did this, we used a lot of just our principal PD time. But this year, the teachers were in agreement that we could set the whole calendar using the teacher PD time too. And so the teachers twice a month run PD focused on areas that they feel that they need to grow. So we've had really good turnout at many of those events. And the last one that I wanted to highlight is our Pineapple Project. And we've got to talk about this a lot for ASH, and it's something that we've been celebrating. If you walk around the building right now, every classroom door has a pineapple on it. And that means that the teachers are open to any of their colleagues coming in to observe them teach. And that is all about, I kept telling them all last year, they have so many great ideas to share. They were just all teaching in isolation. And so it was really highlighting that everyone has something to learn from each other. So they go into each other's classrooms during their special time to just watch a math center lesson or an ELA group. And they talk to the teacher after about something that they'll implement in their classroom.
So for tenant 3, that focuses on the teacher's expectations. So we're asking teachers to adopt and embed differentiation by content protocols into their planning and teaching. And that will be evidenced by a 5% increase in scores as well on NWEA student assessment. So some of the activities that we've been working toward for this, again, based on the PD calendar that we set for the year, we were able to set some specific focuses on differentiation. So we've had some outside folks come in and work with our teachers specifically for math. And again, today, actually, we just specifically focused on ELA. We've also set up make and take sessions. We got feedback from folks that they were interested in being able to actually make materials during PD sessions that they could take and implement the next day. So that was something that we worked really hard to set up for this year as well. We were able to set up vertical alignment meetings, so grade levels 1 below and 1 above could sit together and make sure that they're aligned with what the expectations are from grade level to grade level, and the feedback we've gotten from that has been very positive as well. We also asked our instructional coaches to not just work in the coaching model, but also to push into classrooms. So we set up coverage for grade levels so that all 3 grade level teachers could go in and watch a coach model teach a lesson so that they could get that direct visualization of what that teaching really looks like, and that has been very positive. So we will continue doing that. We've done that for math so far in the fall, and we'll continue to do that for ELA through the winter.
And next is tenant 4, and we kept our goals the same for tenants 3 and 4, and the same for 5 and 6, and we just changed our activities so that way our teachers are always focused on just 3 main goals for one school year. So the goal for tenant 4 is the same, but the activities are a little bit different. So we're doing data teaming weekly, and that's embedded into every teacher's schedule. And at this point of the school year, most teams have met 2 complete data cycles of reaching their goal, and some teams are working on the 3rd, and some teams are still finishing up the 2nd data progress report. The classroom visit by colleagues, and the last one is we've been working on trying to get teachers to be more collaborative with special area teachers, and special area teachers to work more about knowing what's happening in the classroom. So they just did an I Am Peace project. We have the video playing out there, but the author of the book is actually going to use the video from our school to publish into their website, and it was getting our teachers, classroom teachers, theater arts teacher, art teacher, and music to work on one project together. So they all have the same 2 periods free back to back, where they bring that same cohort of kids and they all work together on one project.
Tenet 5 looks specifically at the social and emotional health of our students, and so we're looking at a goal of a 3% decrease in the number of office-managed referrals as reported in our VADER system. So some of the activities we're focusing on for that goal are, we updated our PBIS handbook over the summer, so we implemented some new changes as early as this fall. We have what's called Red Dragons. We could ask our 6th grade friends to talk a little bit about that, but as a class, students can earn Red Dragons for demonstrating behavior as a class. So oftentimes we focus on individual students. Red Dragons are as a class, we can celebrate good things going on. I have been doing fidelity checks, so that's just to pop into a classroom and making sure that what the expectations are for the students are also being explicitly taught to the students by the teacher. We're doing some trauma training through our PD calendar, and we're also about to start a book study on the book Lost at School by Dr. Ross Green. We are actually just today after school again, we are working on developing a resource bank of support strategies with input directly from teachers. So we asked teachers to go around on a gallery walk and write down some strategies that they use for students who may be struggling with some behaviors. We'll combine that all into a document and share that out so that there's one space for folks to look if they have some questions.
Oh, I forgot the postcard. So the last one is Tenet 6, and that's by June 2019, 90% of our parents' guardians will have reciprocal two-way communication with staff for academics and/or positive behavior, as evidenced by a school-wide tracking system. And so the goal here was last year in our first year here, we noticed that we would make phone calls, and I said, well, has the parents heard from you in a positive way? Because there's so many positive things happening. And so our team was completely on board that that became our focus of this school year, is that there's positive parent communication going on. So we developed a tracking system, and we made these postcards, and we wanted to bring one down to show you, but it just says, this is not junk mail, it's a postcard, and it says, this is just a report to tell you how awesome your kid is. And then on the back, the teacher writes a little note, and we put it in the mail, and it goes home through the U.S. mail system. And so far this year, we've sent 95 postcards out. And parents have sent us pictures like, oh, we love having this on the refrigerator. So that's a really big goal that we're proud of our staff for. We've also been more conscientious about tracking our parents and making sure that we know that they're actually reading the stuff or engaged in the stuff. So we've been doing social media. We've been doing Facebook, Twitter, and SNN posts weekly. And now we're running analytics on Facebook and SNNs and Twitter, so we can see how many parents have connected to the Facebook page. So like yesterday, we saw like 1,200 views from our Siena basketball one last week. So we keep tracking to make sure that the stuff we're putting out there is having an impact. And we have 679 parents who are connected and active on Class Dojo right now. Parent engagement sessions, we've run 2 so far. One, we did not get a good turnout, so we asked feedback from the parents, and they said the time of day was not very good and that we should change it to right when they drop their kids off. So we have one next week, and so we're doing it right at 8:15 based on parent feedback to have it right when they're here so they don't have to leave and then come back because everyone's too busy for that. So we appreciated that feedback. So that kind of took you through our SEP. I know it was kind of quick. But that's what we've been working on. So our next slide, we just want to highlight a couple things that we are celebrating right now at ASH. Our staff attendance is at 95%, which we are very happy that the staff want to be here, and that's a huge, they're here tonight, so we want to thank them. We have New York State ELA and math growth. This year we grew by 5% in math and 11% in ELA. We have NWA growth in reading. We don't have math out. They start math next week, so we'll make sure we get that report out. Horizontal and vertical teaming. This is something that Ash has tried to do for years because they all knew it was going to be great. And so it's finally happening now, and we're getting great feedback about it. Instructional coaches are in classrooms every day. We took our kids on a school-wide field trip, and we've got great feedback from the Sienna administrators and other principals from other buildings about how great our kids were and how happy they were that we went on the trip. We have PBIS initiatives, and this is a testament to Ms. Irwin and their PBIS committee. They looked at the areas of our building that we weren't meeting the kids' needs last year. And so we spent this summer developing 3 new systems. They were the Golden Spoon, the Golden Sneaker, and the Red Dragons. So we noticed that our behaviors were increasing in the cafeteria, so that meant we were doing something wrong. So what could we do to address that? And we came up with a Golden Spoon where they earn the spoon and they hang it outside their room. They get very excited. The Golden Sneaker is during PE time because we were noticing increase during PE time. So what could we do to fix that? And then the kids who get this Golden Sneaker award for the week get an extra PE class. So they love that. And I talked to you about our One School, One Book. And the last thing that we want to celebrate, and most important thing, is our students. And this is our 6th grade leadership team. They're going to get up here and talk to you a little bit about things that they're working on this year.
Hello, my name is Leah and I am in the 6th grade leadership program at the Albany School of Humanities. First, we would like to thank the Board of Education Superintendent Adams and the rest of the administrative team for allowing us to speak to everyone today. This program was started this year and we try to improve things in our school and community and help others. We are a group of 8 6th grade students that have been nominated and then selected by our previous 5th grade teachers and current 6th grade teachers along with both principals. We were picked based on our leadership qualities and skills as seen throughout the school day. Here is Brayden to speak about our first project this year.
Earlier this year, our team came up with the idea to help others in the community. After putting our heads together, we decided the best way was to collect supplies for the homeless. Then we made the school-wide thing by asking each grade level to fill up boxes outside their classrooms. We created flyers to go home, posters to hang up around the school, and were able to speak to each classroom about the project. We collected items such as soap, shampoo, scarves, and other winter items. After a 2-week collection period was up, we gathered all the materials and brought them down to the South End Children's Cafe. There we were able to get a tour of the building and learn what they do after school. Here is Jaden to speak about what we did during the open house last week.
On Wednesday, January 9th, Ash held a magnet open house. A few of us from the leadership group gave a tour to the families with children who are going to enter pre-K or kindergarten or looking to enter the Child Magnet Lottery for other grades. We took them to classroom where they had the opportunity to talk with teachers, our special areas. We also asked us questions regarding the school general. We told them about our music and theater opportunity, performance, guest and visitor, war tickets, and 3 B's we follow every day. Here is Nicholas to help give you an idea of our future plans for the leadership program.
We have many things we would like to do to help improve in our school environment. We would like to be the students' people to go to where there is a problem regarding the school. For example, we mentioned to Ms. Irwin in a meeting that all the bathroom stalls didn't have locks. So she got someone to put working locks on all the stalls. We feel we can help improve in the school just by being here and having open communication with other students and administration.
Another thing we would like to improve is the school lunch. We are creating an online survey for the students to take so they can tell us what they think could improve on the menu, items to add to the menu, and what they like and dislike about lunch. We will also be having a meeting with the lunch ladies to discuss options for lunch foods going forward. We also want to update the sign outside the school. We feel as though an electronic sign would benefit our school, as we will be able to share out all the wonderful things going on, such as this leadership program and different fundraisers. This will help spread the word on a bigger scale and involve our Ash community and beyond.
We would again like to thank the Board of Education, Superintendent Adams, and the rest of the administrative team for following us to fill you in about one of the many good things going on here at the Albany School of Humanities. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask one of us or our 2 school leaders, and we will gladly answer them to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. This concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Superintendent, Principal, Assistant Principal, and especially to the children from the Albany School of Humanities. That was a wonderful report, and we really appreciated your making the time to be here tonight. This is the time we set aside to hear from members of the public. No one has signed up to speak tonight, but we do invite members of the public to share thoughts on the decisions we are facing at public, either here at our meetings or by phone or email or postal mail. All of our contact information is available on the district website, albanyschools.org. We're now going to move to the part of our meeting called routine consent. During this part of the meeting, we approve routine matters for the district. That usually includes things like contracts, field trips, hiring of personnel, and other similar matters. We vote on these as a group with no discussion, which allows us to use our meeting time more efficiently. Each Board of Education member has the option to set aside any routine consent item in order to require discussion and a separate vote on that particular item. So with that introduction, I will now entertain a motion to adopt the routine consent agenda. Do I have a motion? Ms. Smith, and a second, Dr. Chatour. Are there any set-asides? Seeing none. All in favor of adopting the routine consent agenda as it is situated? That is unanimous. Wonderful. That brings us to the part of the meeting I like best, to the policy agenda, which I get to turn the microphone over to Dr. Chatour, the chair of the policy committee.
Madam President, members of the board, so we don't have a lot of policies like we had in the last couple of weeks. We have two policies that we have to have an action item on that we discussed last week. 8115, which is pesticides and pest management. And if you remember, the wording was slightly changed to reflect what the SAD mandates are. And 8220 was buildings and grounds maintenance and inspection. Again, the policy was changed slightly to align with the current mandates because some of the old mandates are no longer valid. So can I have a motion to adopt the two policies?
Motion by Ms. Wilson, second. Ms. Alexander Mann. All in favor? That is unanimous.
Okay. Next, we bring to you 4 policies for discussion. 5162 is student release precautions. This policy has been simplified from the currently adopted policy. It states that students may only be released to a parent, guardian, or other parent-approved individuals who are on record with the school. Policy 9645 is disclosure of wrongful conduct. This policy has been revised to include other individuals who may be notified by district staff when wrongful conduct is observed by the staff. The section on whistleblower policy protection has also been revised. Policy 9320 is drug-free workplace. It was a very minor modification to the currently adopted policy just to remove the gender-biased wording and to have an update to the law reference. Policy 9500, which is compensation and benefits, was also revised to remove the gender-specific wordings. And a paragraph that is duplicated erroneously regarding the board president's reporting has been deleted. Any questions?
I don't see any interesting questions. A reminder to members of the audience, with almost everything we do, we discuss in one meeting. These meetings are made available by audio tape to the members of the public who want to listen to them and provide comment before our next meeting when we will act on these policies. Anything else, Dr. Chatour?
Nope, that's it.
Wonderful. That brings us to a discussion of the calendar priorities.
At this time, Mrs. Bechtel will come forward and discuss recommendations from the calendar committee with regard to the priorities and ensuring that we are all one with the way in which we go about developing our calendar as we move forward. What are those considerations and why are these things important as we move forward? And so tonight's discussion is about the direction that we would like to see our calendar committee move in as they are making recommendations for the calendar, but making sure that we're all on one page and we're all united with regard to what are those considerations that the committee should take into consideration when proposing our calendars. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Mrs. Bechtel and Mr. Petrin. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to bring the calendar priorities to the Board of Education. It really was time to look at them as we haven't had any new direction in really several years. So it was a good activity for the committee to engage in this process. I wanted to first go to how we create the calendar, the process of doing that. We must schedule 187 days in our calendar. 3 snow days are included and then subtracted when we use them. We schedule 2 teacher PD days as per the APSTA contract, and one of those must occur before the first day of student attendance. There are 16 days off that must be scheduled as per the APSU contract, and 13 of those days are prescribed. We must, of course, be in session for state testing and scoring days. We will schedule the allowed for superintendent's conference days. They count as student contact days, student attendance days, and they are convocation, our 2 PD days, and 1 parent-teacher conference. We consider the BOCES calendar for days off and most especially for the long breaks, the week-long breaks. So the calendar committee met twice about setting priorities, and we arrived at 3. No student attendance on election days for safety and security reasons. This was something that has been very important to the committee over the last 3 years or so, given many events that have taken place across the country. The second priority is that we really need a staff PD day prior to the first day of school, in addition to the APSTA teacher prep day. And then the third one is to avoid end of year PD days that sort of April, May, June, because of the timing is not great. We really need to get out ahead of the professional development and have people act on it. At the end of the year, people are winding down. We had a very robust conversation about religious holidays, and we decided that we should, for every given year, have the committee consider religious holidays, keeping in mind all of the parameters. The calendar is a little bit, it's tight to construct, and then it is so dependent upon the given year and how that year is falling. So we have to keep in mind the parameters of calendar setting as dictated by the contracts, the priorities listed above, of course the academic needs of students, and attention to maintaining appropriate levels of staffing. I will say again that it's very rare that we have any great deal of flexibility in setting the calendar days. Thank you.
So board colleagues, as always, we will try and do one question at a time so that everybody gets to ask one question before anybody asks a second. Who would like to go first? Before you go, Ms. Alexander-Mann, Ellen, you were the board representative to the calendar committee. Did you have anything you wanted to add to the presentation?
No, I don't have any questions, and I don't have anything specifically that I want to add at this time. I might ask a question later, but not right now.
Well, thank you very much for your service on the calendar committee. Ms. Alexander-Mann.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me? Great. Yes. So I know when I was sitting in the audience last year and the calendar committee was reporting out, there was some discussion about really making an effort to observe Eid, and I wonder what, if any, feedback you would have to date?
We did run data, student attendance data about that day, and it does appear that there were about 200 more student absences on Eid than normal. Our data coordinator ran those numbers based upon attendance before and after that day. As I said in the memo, if you had an opportunity to look at that, it was, I believe that day was also the day after a holiday, another holiday or a long weekend or something. But regardless, it certainly looks as if Eid impacts student attendance, which I think would mean for the calendar committee that we would have to consider that day carefully in any given year as something that we would want to at least consider depending upon the constraints of the calendar.
Great, thank you.
Who's next? Dr. Chatura?
It's not a question, it's more a comment. Considering that the request has come from the community for the last 3 years or more, and that we have a growing population of Muslim students in our district, I would like to see us trying to balance out and be equitable in our religious holidays. Because I know that for the first few years or so, we may have maybe one Eid day, or one of the Eids would fall on a school day, but later on there'll be a time when both of them would fall, and you really don't want kids being out of school, but in the context of making sure we're equitable, if we can accommodate at least one in the times when it falls during a school year, I think it would be, I would like to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilson?
Thank you for your presentation. And just two things really briefly, it's not a question, is that I know we've always discussed this in the context of students, but immediately I always think about our support staff, teachers, and things of that nature also, who it's kind of like a blind aspect of the study. And then I was just sitting here, I know you said you're going to consider it every year, but I was just kind of calculating, like plugging in Ramadan in 2022 and things. And we kind of have like insight into where things fall. So I know you're going to consider it, but we still have projections about approximately where, so we can plan in regards to, like, for example, what Shradar was saying, and keep that in mind too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Lang?
You had stated attendance of election days. You're talking general, primary, and budget, so 3?
There are 2 election days.
Primary is...
I do not believe we have any primary. Do we have primary voting? I'm not aware of that.
Yep, we do. This year, they're looking, well, Board of Elections, they're looking at moving those primaries up the early into June, I believe, and so we would have to consider that.
Yeah, and in the past they've been in September, so it's
Right.
always been a little bit of a disconnect, and we can confirm, but I believe that the same schools are used, the same 5 schools are used in the general as are used in the primary, so I think we've talked about this when the calendar has come up before, that it's a little bit of a strange thing that we're closed for the general. And for the May election gets about 3,000, 3,500 votes. The last primary that I looked at, when the mayoral primary in Albany was 13,000 votes, so more people are voting. That's citywide, right? Some of those people are not in the schools. I don't know what number are in the schools.
So you're not considering the 3,
No,
you're
we won't.
considering the 2?
We'll have to look at that as it comes up, because we've not had to consider it before, but now we will, because it's changing, and so we'll have to look at if that's a consideration that the board wants us to view, then absolutely we will.
I guess we would want to know how many adults are in the building for the September primary versus the May election, right?
Okay.
It does seem a little strange
We can research that and we can include that.
for next time. Vicki? Sorry. Ms. Smith, I switched.
That's quite all right, Madam President. I wanted to thank the calendar committee and Karen, your leadership. I think these priorities are right where what the board had hoped. And my comments are about the sort of content of the calendar, and it may not be in your purview, I'm not sure, but and I will honestly say I have not paid attention over the years about the extent to which this is done, but to the extent that we can document and educate, use the celebrations that go on throughout the year, whether it's be it our community or our students are partaking, whether it's essays or whether it's actually something cultural that goes on, to the extent that that can be incorporated into the calendar so that we are actually learning what X holiday or Z celebration means and its impact. I would love to just, have our communications department continue what they've been doing to promote student work and celebrations and community using the calendar. Thank you.
So my question, which is again is I think like most of these more of a comment. First of all, I want to clarify. I believe you're looking for a board resolution to adopt these priorities as a written confirmation for you, so that you have clear direction. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that is correct.
So for next time when we actually have to vote, this is obviously the discussion, but for next time we'll want to know exactly what the language is of the resolution that we would be adopting. And I assume it would reflect these points 1 through 3 here on your slide, which is the election days, PD prior, and PD not towards the end of the year. I'm pretty comfortable with that. For me, the language about the religious holidays, I am still, and I think I've been pretty consistent about that, really wanting to see some more rigorous rules around in what way we consider religious holidays. I feel that we should have a set of parameters and a set of criteria that we use to determine if something is a religious holiday, something like the number of students who are delayed, something impacting. I know there's a belief that staffing is impacted by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I would like to see some documentation of that. I just don't think that that having done it in the past is a reason to do it in the future. And with a constant evolution of our demographics, I believe we should be agnostic as to the religious significance of the holidays. They have to all be treated the same. So if we're going to do Good Friday, why are we doing Good Friday? If we're going to do Rosh Hashanah, why are we doing Rosh Hashanah? And I personally would like to have, if I'm going to adopt something, if I'm going to vote on something, it would need to be much more clear than we will consider. If that's not part of the resolution, it's not an issue for me because we're just not even adopting it. But for me, the we will consider with no clarity about what that would really mean, it's not sufficient for me to support it. Who would like to go? Ellen, did you want to? You didn't ask.
I think you said what my feelings were more clearly than I would have phrased that. So yes.
Okay. Anyone want to go to a second question? How about Ms. Lang, then Dr. Chador?
Parent-teacher conference. Is there a reason that a second parent-teacher conference isn't something discussed, or is that a contractual thing?
It has come up before in the context of calendar development. We would have to use one of the 4 allowed days to do an additional parent conference day. I actually, if you're going to that, you would like to see one after that second quarter.
I would like to say that I would like to see it discussed and the merits and pros of that. I don't know if anyone else would.
Yeah, we can certainly bring that to the committee.
Dr. Chador.
If you listen to the State of the State address that the governor gave a couple of days ago, he did talk about hopefully making Election Day a holiday for everybody so we get more voter turnout. If that happens, some of these things will be a non-issue. But if that doesn't happen, maybe can we think about, I don't know how easy it is, but things like having the parent-teacher conference on the election day, so you're still sort of, students aren't there, but you're still getting something done, or planning a field trip on that day. So it's something that has to be done sometime during the school year, but if it's done during the day when you don't want to be in the building.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
Anyone else with a second question? Ms. Roach. Ms. Krejci.
Thank you. Just thinking outside the box, by the way, when I did some research on this, I know in the short term we are bound by the various contracts with the teachers and the administrators and our other employees. Interestingly, there are school districts around the country that have classes on Columbus Day, even though it's a federal holiday. I don't know of any in New York State that do that, but that's also something we could consider maybe for flexibility. It's because I'd really like, in addition to the more logistical concerns that you've spelled out in this presentation, I'd really love if there was a way that our calendar could reflect our values. And that would be one day, that would be one way to get more days in there to accommodate religious holidays while also, you know, being more aligned with our values.
Ms. Alexander Mann.
Shot.
I agree with Ms. Roach. That would be one way that we could reflect our values, but also reflect our history, right? Columbus didn't really discover America. So that's all I needed to say. Thank you.
That currently is an APSU mandated day, so it would have to go through contract negotiations.
Is it only APSU?
Yes.
It's not in any other contract?
No.
Okay, good to know. Anyone else for another question? I have one that I've asked before, but I can't seem to retain the answer. At the end of the school year, we have elementary 2 half-days, but we have middle level full day on Thursday and 0 day on Friday. That's what the middle school schedule is a full day on Thursday and no school on Friday, but the elementary is 2 like partial days. Why is that, and what's the rationale behind that?
The last day for middle school is 8th grade graduation, so we don't have 8th grade comes the very last day. I think this year it's June the 26th, and they the only attendance is for grade 8.
So it's a staff day. It counts as a. I'm just trying to
Yes.
think about how it counts in the calendar. It counts as. Does it count as a curricular day?
No, you know, it's interesting that you should ask that question because now BOCES has asked us to calculate the hours in the day. When I sat down with that spreadsheet and put all the hours for, I had to do 3, elementary and middle and high. I took out those hours that students weren't there, so I think that day ends at 11 in the morning or something around there. And so that day it does count as a student attendance day, but it's from 8 to 11.
And again, I'm still trying to get my head around why we do the 2 last days of elementary as 2 partial days instead of just letting them go to school all day on Thursday and not at all on Friday. Why do we do it that way?
I think it's been a traditional thing, and I believe that it has to do with allowing teachers time at the elementary level to wrap up the things that have to be wrapped up in an elementary classroom, the materials, just the environment of an elementary classroom is there needs to be time to get to that work. You know, could we do 1 day instead of 2 half days? We certainly could.
So I guess I would argue that for families having to provide coverage, 2 half days is very, very difficult. So if I don't understand how it's creating a lot more capacity for teachers, right? Because it might be 1 more hour of teacher free time, but it is a significant impact on parents who have to provide childcare those 2 days, have to adjust their work schedules those 2 days instead of just 1. It is a meaningful impact on children's families.
I would like to check in with the elementary principals and Dr. Wilson Turner about if there's something that I'm unaware of in terms of those days.
Okay.
We can look into
And
that.
Ms. Lang?
I would just like to ask about the data of those kids that do go to those 2 half days or that last half day of school. Do they even come? And if they're not coming, then I would like to address that. So I appreciate the principal's feedback, but also the data behind the student.
We can pull the data.
attendance.
Any other comments or questions for the calendar crew? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your, I'm sorry, Ms. Krejci.
So my understanding is that the calendar committee is meeting again next week, right?
On the 22nd.
To come up with a draft of an actual calendar to bring before the board. That's correct, right?
Yes.
And we're also going to need the written resolution that we would adopt next time based on this conversation. If it's radically different than this conversation, we would want to kind of stall again, right? Because we generally discuss and then vote. But if it's consistent with this discussion, then we can treat this discussion as the discussion of that resolution. Anybody else? I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Ellen. Anyone else? Okay, now, thank you very much. We appreciate your hard work, you and everyone on the calendar committee. Next topic on the agenda tonight is the discussion by the Student Support Services folks.
Good evening. So we will welcome our Student Support Services Department to the table. Thank you so very much for being here tonight, and we look forward to your presentation. Hello. So we have with us, so here's what I will say. If you are able to pull it up while we are working with our technology, please pull it up. We have with us tonight Carrie Kenzon-Ball and Carla McDowell. Carrie is the director of, I'm still going ahead presenting. Carrie is the director of our Pupil Personnel Services, and Carla is our assistant director.
And Mike Panetta is our other assistant director, and he sends his regrets. I could begin with my talking points from the first slide, which is really just an overview. As you're aware, thank you for having us this evening. As you're aware, Pupil Personnel Services continues to support a preventative model, which you hear us talk about that a lot. We now have grown to support a variety of other areas, including safety and security, school health services, behavioral health services, and disconnected youth. We work closely with special education, other district administration, related service providers, and community agencies to assess and meet the needs of professional development needs of our staff and the social emotional developmental needs of our students. Thank you. This includes communicating the framework for the role of student support teams in each building, which consist of school psychologists, social workers, behavior specialists. We coordinate monthly meetings. We facilitate the hiring process for everyone on our staff. We create, and a big push for us is creating universal professional development in the area of the Safe School System and Dignity for All Students Act and the Code of Conduct, which Ms. McDowell supports all of that. We collaborate with the Grants Office regarding My Brother's Keeper Challenge Grant, Performance Partnership Pilot Grant, Community Schools Grants, and we also look towards securing additional funding in the area of McKinney-Vento to support our homeless students and families. And now we're embarking on records archiving grants as well. This all supports the preventative strategies and our work towards the reduction of disproportionality and the streamlining of services. We train key stakeholders throughout the district, and we support the consistent structure and implementation of the district's RTI MTSS model. We work closely with the independent monitor and ombudsperson through the Office of the Attorney General to ensure compliance with our assurance of discontinuance. And we partner with Albany Police Department, New York State Police Project Coordinator of Safe Schools regarding crisis response. And we build capacity throughout the district for trauma-informed care and a resilience approach in all we do. And I would like to point out that Erica Jerome is here from STAR. She is in the district this week. She's been coming every month, and we're really excited. We had a meeting today with the administrators of the buildings that we're targeting, and we're starting to see the fruits of our labor. So thank you for being here tonight, Erica. Quick rundown of what you'll see tonight and hear from us regarding current past goals, updates, strengths and challenges, what we're working on currently, in addition to the scope of the work for next year. So as an overview, we focus in 4 major areas, including registration and records, and that includes Central Reg, open enrollment, working papers, student records requests, archiving, and then we support a variety of federal and state mandates and reporting, many of which I just mentioned, violent and disruptive incident reporting, superintendent hearing process, DASA, Dignity for All Students Act, Child Protective Services reporting, McKinney-Vento, foster care, attendance, and Medicaid services. I'd also like to point out that Megan Warren is here, our Quality Assurance Manager, who really is behind us in securing all of the data that you've seen and pulling that information and then doing those quality assurance checks consistently, and made such headway in the area of Medicaid as well for us. And we have Jack Rogan, Director of Security, Safe Schools and Violence Prevention, so I thank them both for being here as well. Carla.
So some of our program oversight includes homeschooling, home instruction, positive behavior interventions and supports, or PBIS, restorative practices, therapeutic crisis intervention, TCIS, response to intervention, RTI, multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, the behavior side, preventative strategies plan, character education, the evening tutorial programs, trauma-informed schools, which Carrie just mentioned about with Erica here through Star Global, safe schools and violence prevention, particularly with Jack Rogan, school health services, behavioral health services, incarcerated youth, connecting youth in transition, and family and support, family and student support team process. We call it the FAST, F-A-S-S-T, which we'll get into a little bit more as well. We have supervision and evaluation of the following individuals: attendance teachers, behavioral specialists, school counselors, social workers, central registration staff, school nurses, safe school and violence prevention staff, and quality assurance. So I'm going to go through an overview of last year's goals, and we're going to give you an update. So over the past year, our priorities have included a review of the pupil personnel services structure. We worked with our student support teams to define all roles and responsibilities and department functions. We examined best practices for school counselors and began the development of an updated New York Ed guidance program requirement. That's a comprehensive guidance plan that's supposed to be rolled out next school year. We supported the Code of Conduct by building universal training materials on the Code of Conduct, as well as Dignity for All Students Act. We provided professional development on interpreting the Code of Conduct, as well as for Dignity Act coordinators, developed consistent training protocols for new and existing administrators and staff who use the violent and disruptive incident reporting, or the VADR system. We focused on response to intervention, RTI, and preventative strategies plans. We began creating an RTI framework at the secondary level. We continue to develop principles for positive behavioral interventions and supports K through 12. By developing the district-wide behavioral specialist work into the grade 6 through 12 setting, we supported PBIS coaches through monthly professional development in collaboration with BOCES, provided targeted professional development on the following: restorative practices, therapeutic crisis intervention system, trauma-informed schools, crisis response planning, mindfulness. And we worked at enhancing, increasing safety and security with the crisis response. We formed district and building planning teams, and I think there'll be more about that as well. Here's some of our data that we'd like to highlight tonight. What you see is a comparison between the 16-17 school year and the 17-18 school year. The homeless population had a slight increase of about 0.5%. New entrants to the district decreased by about 3%. There was an increase in referrals that required administrator response, or we call that office managed behaviors. That increase was about 30%. And our unique suspensions increased by 30% compared to last year as well. Our trends are showing that we are increasing in the use and documentation of preventative strategies in all classroom levels. We've increased the use of restorative practices across K through 12, and we've had a decrease in the reports of emergency physical interventions. A decrease in classroom managed behaviors at the high school level, increase of students in least restrictive environments, and that was course-placed students have decreased by 50%. A decrease in suspensions at the high school level, and a slight increase in school attendance district-wide. Our challenges still remain a lot of the same as last year. Disproportionality still exists in office-managed referrals, our violent and disruptive incident reports, the VADER system, and in suspensions, particularly for our male students, students with disabilities, and students of color. Student mobility continues to be a factor with our homeless population, and transiency is increasing. We've experienced an increase in weapons found through routine security, as well as in other circumstances. That increase is about 48% between last year and the year before. Although there's been a decline in court-placed youth, we are faced with the challenges of programming for this unique population upon the return to our district.
So now moving into the current year, 18-19, and our areas of focus. From our last update regarding the assurance of discontinuance, Ms. McKenna reported that we are on track for a discontinuation of the oversight by the Attorney General's office. However, as you know, and I think we're all in agreement, our work does not end with the assurance of disagreement. PPS continues to actively monitor all aspects of the preventative strategies plan, and we will continue to do so into the future. We're already engaged in conversations with Ms. Adams and other members of the administrative team to move that work forward and continue. In support of the reduction of disproportionality, PPS provides technical assistance and professional development in all of the areas that we just mentioned. We are strengthening our partnerships with the Albany Police Department, other community agencies such as New York State Police, and community-based agencies such as SNUG, who have been much more of a presence in our buildings, at our parent universities, right by our side. Last week they attended the Parent University PTSA meeting at the high school with us, and we are definitely feeling the benefits of that partnership. We've also strengthened and expanded our partnership with Parsons Child and Family Center to enhance existing behavioral health clinics and add new ones throughout the district, including at Albany International Center, Edmund J. O'Neill Middle School, and Tony Clement Center. We're very excited about this work. We had 3 clinicians start this week, and we're bringing on a psychiatric nurse practitioner who will be able to run full evaluations when needed and monitor medications and provide direct services to our families right on site. So we're very excited. In conjunction with the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, district-wide secondary RTI MTSS team was formed to align our system that we have, K-5, and bring it up into the secondary level to support struggling and at-risk students in the areas of academic and behavior, and looking at the whole child. As Carla had mentioned, we are required to roll out the comprehensive guidance plan for next year, and that is well underway and in progress, and that's an area of focus that Mr. Panetta has been working on. We continue to support PBIS and break down that support at the elementary and secondary levels because we're in different places there. We've expanded that work with a district-wide behavior specialist and RTI coordinator. We've restructured TCIS and have turnkey trainers assigned to support every building in crisis prevention, de-escalation, and emergency physical restraint. We also have 12 turnkey trainers in the area of restorative practices, and we begin to build capacity at each level. We're seeing some really great work in that area in certain buildings like Edmund J. O'Neill, at the high school, People are really bringing restorative work into their everyday instruction. Trauma-informed care, as I mentioned, we're focusing right now on Philip Schuyler, Achievement Academy, Edmund O'Neill, as well as Tony Clement. And it's a year-long project that we've got going there. But we continue to look to align resources equitably and build faculty and staff awareness to serve our diverse student body to a place of support rather than punishment and disciplinary practice in isolation. So to that end, we've created a diversion program, which you will hear about now. It's okay. Want me to do it? Okay, I'll just keep going. So in partnership with the Department of Criminal Justice Services and several other community-based agencies and under Lori McKenna's leadership, PPS has formed a comprehensive diversion program using a team approach called the Family and Student Support Team, or the FAST team. Here, students are diverted away from prolonged interruption of their educational environment. They're also diverted away from PINS complaints and the criminal justice system through a multi-pronged approach involving clinical assessment, service linkage, and intensive case management. The FAST coordinator, who is Molly Peluso, psychologist, who works out of Tony Clement, will work with the students and families to administer designated screeners and assessment tools as appropriate, which will include a trauma assessment and a resilience assessment. And through this process, enhanced cross-system communication and coordination is fostered through the sharing of information and services. So basically, the student comes, the way it will flow is they'll potentially be recommended for a superintendent's hearing. They work with Carla and the FAST coordinator and the FAST team. We encourage families to give consent for this process, and then we do our assessments and we create an individualized service plan based on the domains of the assessment. And then targeted referrals and services are offered to youth with behavioral health needs, including evidence-based treatment services. We created a tiered service matrix that outlines services that are available within the district and outside of the district, which include wraparound services. So in our work to combat disproportionality, we analyze data to identify racial and ethnic inequities within the discipline system and other points in the system. So this comprehensive plan really helps support students rather than who otherwise may be on suspension. This really is linking them with preventative services and interventions. Carrying the work into 2019-20, we will continue to support all aspects of social emotional behavior support, professional development, and preventative strategies. We're trying to create systems that connect disengaged youth and building upon those systems as well. At this time, we have no additional resources that we're requesting from PPS, and we continue to look at our current resources and align them with our systems and structure and maximize and create efficiencies. And that's what we have.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for a presentation that doesn't have a budget request. It's very unusual for people to come and say we do not have an additional budget request for next year, so it's nice, a little refreshing. So board colleagues, as usual, we will do one question at a time, so everyone gets one question before anybody else gets a second question. Who would like to go first? Ms. Lang.
Seen you a lot with policy, with the code of conduct and everything, so hello. So I want to talk to you about middle school. I don't really know how much I can say with the information that I have and the data, the VADERS and everything that's gone out. But are we seeing the VIE or the need for divergence at a smaller or a earlier intervention need? Because I was going to ask about family engagement, but then when you talked about the diversion, you covered everything, and I thought that was great with the parental and the wraparound service. And I'm assuming that those are some of the ones that are our most highly needed, that are getting that type of intervention. And with the numbers of the middle school seeming to be higher with the behavioral, the referrals, the office management, is there a second tier type approach, or are those the interventions that PPS is starting to do with the principals, or kind of walk me through those that are maybe in the data of middle school having the data that it has versus the children that are placed in the diversion?
So the diversion program, the FAST team, is available to any student in grade 6 through high school. We have additional programs that also support disengaged youth. And you heard me mention the performance pilot program, so that's disconnected youth, connecting youth in transition, I'm sorry, thank you. So basically that can serve any student who is at risk of dropping out or had contact with law enforcement or is really struggling or is returning from incarceration. Again, that age span is 14 through 24, and anyone can make that referral. So, you know, we have several different avenues to support that, but it doesn't necessarily need to be through either one of those. So PPS often makes referrals to intensive case management and other avenues to support families and students. And I think Carla might have a couple more. Did you have any more to add?
I'm not sure if I fully understood your question. So are you asking like what is available for the middle school level? Is that what you're asking?
Right. When I look at the management cases and the referrals, it seems that middle school really has the highest number of those behaviorals, those suspensions. You know, it doesn't seem to be decreasing necessarily. And so when you were talking about some of the intense programs, which are great, and thank you for saying those, I was just, you know, wondering if this is something that the programs are being implemented at the middle school in a different way, or how that was working for the middle schools.
And exactly what Carrie said, and the only thing I would point out is you heard us say twice Edmund J. O'Neill, you know, different initiatives, additional services being put in there, as well as the Tony Clement Center, the alternative, you know, placement that we have for students. Again, additional services, additional supports. And, you know, our full service models, really taking that on and making sure that we have consistency and equity, you know, as much as possible. You know, and I know I don't know if this also falls into it, but really a lot of our building-wide, the budget items that were approved last year, I think, of course, we just began with these new additional positions which were approved this school year. And those teams are coming together, and we've been seeing the beginning of some great work, but I do think it will take a little bit more time to start seeing the difference.
I'm sorry. So Hackett has a behavioral health clinic that is very strong and has been up and running, so we really want to duplicate what's working in certain middle schools and bring it to the other middle schools. We're trying to focus our work with our district-wide behavior specialist, Marcy Bouchard, and our RTI coordinator at Tier 1 universal strategies, preventative strategies that will help the entire building. So if we begin to work at that, we'll be able to better funnel to see who needs Tier 2 and Tier 3 services.
Who's next? Ms. Smith?
Thank you very much for the presentation and the data. And I really, really want to ask you, are you sure there's nothing budgetary that you want to think about? You know, and I really don't mean to be funny about it, but well, just continue to be disturbed by the level of bullying, the level of weapons, at elementary level. Kidding me? And I do hear what you're saying about what we're needing to do is continue to align our resources, and you think you've got all the staffing that we need, but I feel as if I want to push you to think about is there something else that we need? And maybe it's some sort of additional bridge with community. Maybe we've got partners who are helping us do that. You have to help me understand that.
Sure.
So that's kind of where and I really, really appreciate having this data, as hard as it is to for you to put in, for us to have going on in our schools. It's something we have to deal with.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, you got that? We are in the process of developing the budget, and so we have no problem if they can go back and review. We do know that we have things that we're looking at, partnerships that we're looking at. How can we always review our safety plans and security plans? But absolutely, under the leadership of Ms. McKenna, they can go back and review and see where there may not be, but where there may be some enhancements.
Just to add, at the time that this was finalized and submitted, we, as recent as last Thursday or Friday, had a 2-hour district-wide school safety team meeting, which included every single SRO, Lieutenant Gerasi, sent reps, Jack Grogan, and we have a list of items that we're working through with Ms. McKenna to bring forth to Cabinet for review regarding enhanced security and safety.
I also want to note that there are some budget requests around school safety and individual building requests, which we'll be bringing forward as well.
And so those, so just to clarify, those requests, if they're aligned with the school, still are aligned with PPS. It just may not be separated out.
Yeah. And so I hear you saying safety and security. I think I'm also trying to figure out what else. Honest to goodness, I wish my grandmother were here, because I think she would like start a grandmother's brigade. And it's around the kinds of things that you describe in here as being disrespectful behavior, that sort of thing. Some cultural traditions being brought into play. I'm just asking you to think beyond your wildest imagination.
Constantly researching evidence-based practice, bringing in experts to the district. For example, yesterday we were very fortunate, I thank you, for having the 2-hour PD. So we engaged in a discussion with LaSalle. They came and they did a talk for our middle school support teams on high-risk sexualized behavior, what's normal, what's atypical, and they really broke it down through a researched evidence-based program into green light, yellow light, red light, what's normal teenage behavior, when do you throw up some red flags, how do you respond to these pretty colorful things that we hear in the hallways. So out of that 2-hour discussion yesterday, we have these partners who are experts in that area working with us to develop almost mini lessons, if you will, on how to, almost like a script to teachers on how to respond, what you can do, where are the resources. So and these things, again, they did that pro bono, right? So, it may not mean that we're not asking for monetary resources right now, but we're still working with experts in the field to bring that to all of our middle school levels. So that's where that began.
Ms. Alexander-Mann, did you have your hand up a second ago?
I did. My first question, well, I have one very brief question. The suspensions are not broken out between in school and out of school. There's still a lot of suspensions, but the elementary schools surpassed, and I'm still not clear on what that's about. And that's just a statement, and we can wait for the information. But the question that I have is, do we ever have the opportunity to step back and ask those folks with boots on the ground, what are those things that are working and what are those things that are not working? That's the question.
Thank you for asking that question, because we have so many resources here that are wonderful, but really where I see us struggling is that fidelity to program, and do we step back and ask those questions? So we're embarking upon an initiative alignment through PPS, where basically a committee of boots on the ground people, stakeholders, are coming and we're listing out virtually everything that we touch, everything you heard us talk about here, and all of our resources, how they're being used, what measurable outcomes do we have, and then whether or not we should continue, because all of them are aligned. Therapeutic crisis intervention is aligned with trauma-informed care, is aligned with the preventative strategies, but it's coordinating it all, seeing what's working well, where we're having impact, and what we need to adjust. So that is all in process.
Dr. Chaudhuri.
We just have one more point on that.
I was just going to add a couple things that we discussed recently with Superintendent Adams, Assistant Superintendent Lori McKenna, our ombudsperson and independent monitor in our group. We had talked about something like you just said, taking kind of a deep dive and each principal looking at their data, although this happens on a regular basis, but really having some time set aside to look at and reflect upon the data. So I wanted to just mention that. We do that through the data workbooks, as we call it. And also, you know, having, and Superintendent Adams has allowed us to take her time at the February meeting, remember that, Ms. Adams? And so we're really excited to do some more work. But again, to your point, I think having this part of our routine is really, really important.
If I may add to that, one of the pieces that this whole data dive will do, it's something that Dr. Wilson Turner has worked with her schools, as well as Ms. McKenna in working with her schools. It's not enough to say that our numbers are increasing. Knowing why they're increasing, that is the key. Because, you know, can it be happenstance? Absolutely. But one of the things that we're really working with principals and building leaders is looking at that data and determining, why does this work? Are we getting the return on the investment for the things that we are doing, and clearly with intent and with purpose, knowing this is what works, this is why it works, and now we're moving forward in this direction to enhance those practices. So those are things that have been implemented through the principals' check-ins, at our principals' meetings, and now we're just taking it one step further as we keep moving through the data and helping people understand not just the numbers that you have, but what do these numbers mean? And then how do we use those numbers to drive instruction and to drive our practices?
Dr. Chaudhuri.
Perfect segue for my question. So well, I'm looking at the data on the PDF file. You know, when you look at it, it clearly shows the issues are mostly at the middle school level. And then there's another data set which breaks down classroom versus office managed behaviors. And when you look at it, it's the classroom managed behaviors haven't changed over the last 3 years. It's the office managed issues that have double, triple, in some cases quadrupled. So what has happened between, and things were going down between 3 years ago and last year, and then it suddenly spiked this year. So what changed? I'm just trying to understand, you know, how do you define that?
Do you want me to start with that one?
Sure.
Okay, one of the things, because this was the topic of our last meeting when we met with our ombudsman and also Maxine. Some of it is called that implementation dip and spike. At the very beginning, people identify because of the buzzword that they hear. Then you start to needle through that and clarify, what does it truly mean, and does it really qualify for this or does it not? So that's going to be a piece of it that once you start, then as a culture, we're going to start reacting to that. The other sidebar to that is sometimes there's an overrepresentation, and then we have to figure out why. Once we figure out why, then we're able to get to the meat of what's really going on, and then the numbers start to level out so that you can get to the true core of what's going on. Many times that's what we see. In some of the cases when Valerie was presenting some of the information, it was an overrepresentation. And then we had to back out of that and look at, okay, so now of the 25 items, 10 of them are the ones that we need to really go deeply into because those are the true trends.
So are you saying that this is the storm before the calm?
I sort of have a different belief because I tend to believe that higher numbers are not necessarily bad because several things happen with higher numbers. Number one, people can feel more comfortable coming forward with information, so therefore we're getting people reporting incidences because they're more comfortable reporting them, but also they're getting results. So I'm not going to say that a lower number is necessarily a positive sign if the lower number is masking the fact that people are not comfortable reporting and we as an organization are not responding to situations that come about. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but I'm just saying that I have to look at the data for what it really means. And whether the number is high or low, yes, that's important, but it's not as important as delving into why it's high or why it's low.
From my perspective, and I think I'll be more happy if things like unsafe actions are low, and the small things like being distrustful is not a good thing, but I would rather take a bigger number in that than a bigger number in something more serious.
Ms. Wilson, did you have your hand up a second ago?
Thank you for your presentation. And my original question you've addressed when you talked about the mini lessons. I was going to inquire about like the nature of the de-escalation techniques and the soft skills, so thank you for that. My other question was about sort of like the dichotomy of how people understand discipline. So there's like, I don't want to say old school, but for lack of a better term, like this enforcement, compliance, attitude, you're supposed to be obedient. And now we're seeing like a shift in understanding that it's more mindfulness, like self-mastery and emotional intelligence and how that impacts the student, impacts the classroom. And I'm wondering if you're seeing or understand at this point what the level of buy-in on the student level, the buy-in on the teacher community, like parent level and things of that nature and that shift. And I was just curious about that.
I think the biggest indicator of that is the positive response we've had to restorative practices. Requests for training, a whole movement at the high school that Mr. Panetta is starting up, I believe next week. I'm going to go over there and observe that. We're doing lots of restorative work. I think I highlighted this maybe at this meeting last time. Edmund J. O'Neill, they're doing a push-in model where they're having restorative conversations in the hallway with students instead of just sending them to the office for a managed referral or to a timeout room. We're seeing restorative practices employed at Sheridan Prep, for instance, to reteach PBIS behavior. I would agree. But also to backtrack in agreement with what Superintendent Adams talked about, I think we're getting better at documenting and then removing the stigma of documentation as well. But we can't ignore the fact that we've seen a lot of violence uptick in the community, which, as you know, spills over into the school, right? So you mentioned the increase in weapons that you've seen. We are constantly looking for ways to help kids feel safe, en route to school and while at school. And then, we're working on another set of, I'll call it a mini lesson again, on what is safe to bring to school and what's not safe to bring to school. And who can you tell? We're going to begin to partner with APD. We talked about it at today's safety and security meeting on See Something, Say Something campaign, which is sponsored by Department of Homeland Security, another free thing. So we really are resourceful in looking for evidence-based programs that work.
Ms. Krejci.
Hi, I just had a question about, and this relates to some extent to budget, the connection that your department has to TCCE and what specific focus you work on there and what additional resources you might need there to improve what's going on in the building.
Okay. So we have, I would say one of our strongest relationships is at Tony Clement. Equity, I think, is defined as giving people what they need. So we're out in the buildings that really need it most. So a lot of our focus right now is at Tony Clement, Edmund O'Neill, and we are supportive in, for instance, starting up the behavioral health clinic. You know, we found a spot, thanks to Mr. Rivers, to house our nurse practitioner right there in one of his offices. Our two clinicians have started there. I went to greet them on Monday morning. And we really, whenever we can, we're out there supporting that building for whatever is needed. They know to call us. I know Carla is on the phone with them constantly, providing technical assistance, working on restorative. Did you have more to add?
No, and I think just the same as you were saying with equity regarding pupil personnel, staff. So of course we just don't go by the numbers, we go by the need, and that's why Tony Clement Center has more pupil personnel services per pupil. They have more staff.
Our FAST coordinator is Molly Peluso. She works at Tony Clement, so she is working closely with us and PPS to implement the diversion program. So it's a very strong connection there.
So several of my colleagues have asked very deep questions about how we're making change, and I have those same questions, and I appreciate their asking. I'm going to ask a very small question, which is about how you're presenting the data, and I'm going to ask that you think about ways that you can present this data in context. So, for example, you have elementary unique suspension count each year, but you don't show that as a percentage of how many elementary students we have each year. So those raw numbers are very hard to contextualize unless you have to now, I have to go back and look at how many elementary students do we have that year. And I find that that's not just your department. I find that that's something that comes up all the time, is that I think it's really, it has to do, I think, with the two things. One, it's easy to pull the data when they're raw, right? It's one thing. But also, you're so fluid with the data that you're thinking about the whys and the hows. And because we're not dealing with it every day, we're still trying to figure out the what. And so when we look at these numbers and we see the middle school, like the elementary VADERs are higher than the high school VADERs, and you go, but then you think, wait a minute, there's way more elementary school students than there are high school students. So if I look at the elementary VADERs as a percentage of our elementary population versus the high school VADERs as a percentage, I didn't actually do that math, but if I did, it would change my perception of those numbers. So it's not really something you need to respond to, except for as you think about how to present information to us, I think that would be helpful. That was my first question. We're now going to go to second questions. Vicky asked for one, and then we're going to go Sridhar and Tabitha, and then we'll see what happens next.
Okay. And I'll be quick here. So I wanted to go exactly where Anne was going, because it's sort of like this is just one side, one kind of perspective. And I also, not to add more work, I don't want you to think about this, but I want to also begin to think about, so when you've implemented something, I want to be able to see, oh, was there a spike in something because of that? And where? At the elementary school, at the high school? Was there an incident in the community? What happened when that, did we have more incidents? Because I want to, your statement, Superintendent, in response to Ms. Alexander-Mann and Dr. Chatur about the why, I think that helps. That's what we don't have, and I think that's what Anne was articulating much better than I. But thank you so much for the presentation again, because it does help us have this discussion. Thank you.
Dr. Chatur.
My question is actually about the budget. When you look at the last year versus the proposed budget, I mean, there's a modest increase. But what I'm trying to understand is in pupil services, contractual expenses, and travel conference, those are the two items that seem to have gone up. One of them has gone up, is more than double, the other one's more than triple. I'm just trying to understand why. Are there more people now that are going to conferences, or is it things were on a grant before that has now gone away?
Yes, and you're actually not the first person that asked that. We have people going to, for instance, we have the new 612 team that we need to send to the national PBIS conference this year. It happened to be in Chicago. So those are two people that didn't exist in the department previous to that. Right now, safety and security has fallen under this. There are some national conferences there, like the NASRO conference. Those are quite pricey. We tried to get a team together to go in February. It didn't work out this year, so that money will be a savings because it happened to be during February break and the cost just got too astronomical, so we bailed on that. But it doesn't necessarily mean we'll use all of it, but we do have a number of new staff
I'm just trying to
members. Yep.
understand. I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen.
Right.
We want all our staff to be trained on
So-
these principles and philosophies.
Right. I mean, we've absorbed probably, including safety and security monitors, about 125 people, about 40 extra nurses. So we've absorbed close to 200 additional staff.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilson, I believe you had a second question?
Thank you. And the final thing I was curious about was the analysis of our data concerning attendance, and also if we do any side-by-side with neighboring schools, like analyzing, cross-referencing what's going on in their schools with ours, is my question.
I think, whenever we find best practice, we share it. I personally haven't engaged in any conversations other than former colleagues that I've worked with about different attendance initiatives that they've had. And we absolutely are focused on that. And another campaign that we'd like to, kick off as well, and, focus on chronic absenteeism and ways to address that.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a second question? Just for context, we had allowed 10 minutes for discussion on this topic, and we are well above that at this time. So think about your second question. If you have one, we certainly should honor that, but think about the essentialness of that second question. Ms. Lang.
I know that we had a category of assault, and we also have a category of weapons. Do we have any data of assault by weapons?
Those codes are driven by the state, so no.
Anyone else for an additional question?
And just so you know, the assault could include a weapon, but you have to choose one of the categories.
Anyone else have
Which is
another
extremely
question they
rare.
want to ask? So thank you very much for that, the opportunity to ask you all those questions and for your presentation. I believe that I speak for the whole board when I say that we believe that our students need you. They need what you're doing in order to be academically successful. We believe in this whole process, and we'll continue to make sure that there are resources available to you to do the work that you need to do. So thank you so much. So that brings us to a discussion of the ESSA accountability designation.
Good evening again, Madam President, members of the board. Well, we have some exciting news tonight. We still want to make sure that we maintain our perspective of the work that we have ahead and what the ESSA accountability status means to us as a district. Last board meeting, you heard about the accountability requirements at a very high level. What does it mean holistically? And tonight we have Dr. Cecily Wilson Turner, Mr. Kent Baker, and Ms. Lori McKenna to talk to us about what does this mean in terms of our individual schools, what we're doing now, and what some of our next steps will be. So thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for allowing us to talk about the accountability status of the City School District of Albany. As Superintendent Adams mentioned earlier tonight, that the State Education Department announced the 2018-19 district and school accountability determinations as required by the federal Every Student Succeeds Act and New York's ESSA plan. Our district and schools earned a score for all students and for student subgroups. Such subgroups include members of racial and ethnic groups, low-income students, students with disabilities, and English language learners. These levels are used to determine whether a district is a district in good standing or a target district, and whether a school is in good standing or identified as a comprehensive support and improvement school or a targeted support and improvement school. Just to put some context before we get into the statuses of our schools, I just want to go over some accountability terms with you. So a district or a school in good standing simply means that they've met all of the accountability metrics for all students and for all the subgroups that I just mentioned. If you're a target district, which we are, it means that the target districts are determined by a set of criteria. And the first set of criteria is based on the identification of whether or not there is a CSI or a TSI school within that district. If any school in the district is identified for a CSI or a TSI, then the district is identified as well. The second criteria is based on districts that were in focus status during the 2017-18 school year, which we were, and whose all students subgroup met the criteria for CSI identification or had a subgroup that met the criteria for TSI identification. Moving from a target district down to our schools, if a school is identified as a targeted support and improvement school, this is a very similar identification status to a focus school status that we had last year. They're identified based on a subgroup performance, had to previously been identified as a focus or a priority school, and a targeted support and improvement school can be identified annually, which is a little bit different than a CSI school. Comprehensive supports and improvement school is similar to our former priority schools. They're identified based on the all student performance, meaning that the all student group did not meet or exceed the standards. And this, to be considered a comprehensive support and improvement school, it's the 5% of all schools in New York State, the bottom 5%. And our CSI schools are identified every 3 years, so we will not see a CSI school next year because they're identified every 3 years, correct? Right. Not a new one, correct, yep. And then, of course, out of the comprehensive support and improvement schools, there's a subcategory, and we know that as receivership schools. And our CSI schools who are identified as priority schools in 2017-18 are now receivership schools. Ms. Adams earlier did talk about the status for each of our schools. As you know, we are a target district. We have 9 schools in good standing: Arbor Hill, Ash, Montessori, Pine Hills, New Scotland, SA, Hackett, Eon, and Arbor Hill. I'm sorry, and our Albany High School. We also have 3 targeted support and intervention schools: DCS, Eagle Point, and Toast. And then we have 4 comprehensive support and improvement schools: Giffen, North Albany, SPA, and Myers. And out of those 4, 2 of the 4 are identified as receivership schools because they were priority schools last year, and they are Giffen and SPA. I do want to note that originally when the statuses came out, the preliminary statuses came out, that Edmund O'Neill was identified as a CSI school. We did appeal that because they've only been in existence for 1 year, and we know that it takes 2 consecutive years of not making progress in a school to be identified. And because they were only in existence 1 year, the commissioner upheld that appeal, and so the school is now considered a school in good standing for the 18-19 school year. Turn it over to Mr. Baker.
So in looking at changes in the system, I'm going to crosswalk elements of the prior system to the latest iteration of differentiated accountability. And under the previous system, it was essentially ELA and math performance, particularly for elementary and middle schools, and graduation rate was incorporated into the high school realm. And in the new system, it's more expansive domain of indicators. And so there are certainly still many factors to consider when it comes to performance in ELA and math. There is a much broader core subject index, which incorporates science assessment scores into the formula. And in high school, reading exams will also include science and social studies. In addition, there are some what we kind of consider predictive indicators, measurement in absenteeism, CCR, which is college career and civic readiness, as well as ELP, or English language proficiency acquisition. And in looking at the terms, the previous system used priority as the status for the lowest performing ELA and math schools. Under the new system, CSI is the most severe of all statuses. In the previous system, focus schools were primarily those that were targeted on on subgroups. And in the new system, TSI is basically areas where we have subgroup deficiencies. And in the prior system, high-performing schools were known as reward. And in the parlance of the new system, high-performing schools will be known as recognition schools. And the multiple measures of success are, again, these domains from which we draw the indicators that lead to identification and also measurement and evaluation. So the student achievement realm still is primarily dominated by scores on state assessments. And there is a composite performance index that is calculated for elementary and middle schools. And for high school, that also includes that social studies exam. Growth remains for elementary and middle schools, and that essentially takes students in grades 4 through 8. It looks at their achievement on exams from the current year and then looks back 3 years at students who performed similarly in those years. And that's how the growth is measured. Growth is not a component for the high school realm. Academic progress is basically looking at how we close gaps. And so there are long-term state goals as well as what are known as MIPS, or measures of interim progress. Those are more locally based. State takes our baseline performances, breaks that out to the overall desired achievement index, and then further factors that into smaller achievable units of growth. Grad rates certainly are still a part of the measurement system for the high school realm, and is also measured by state long-term goals as well as MIPS. The ELP, or English Language Proficiency metric, is also based on MIPS and will measure the progression of students toward proficiency on the NYSESLAT exam, which is the alternate exam for English language proficiency. Chronic absenteeism is now a major part of the accountability system, and that is defined as students missing at least 10% of the enrolled days of school, and that is also going to be measured according to a MIP. And then the College Career and Civic Readiness Index is a wide array of indicators, such as college and career and technical education certifications. Scores on exams like AP and IB are factored in. There are also credits for students taking part in achieving credit in advanced coursework. So it's a much broader index and measurement in terms of how students are prepared for the world beyond high school. And the SED is currently looking at adding other indicators for the next wave of identification. So subsequent to 2021, things like out-of-school suspension rates may be factored into the accountability system.
So there are some changes to the requirements of what identified schools have to do under the new system. So a bullet that's not up there is the target district, and that's because there isn't a significant change to the requirements for being a target district. We are still responsible for developing our district comprehensive improvement plan based on a needs assessment, and we'll continue that process this year as we have in the past. However, for our TSI, CSI, and receivership schools, there are some slight changes. Our TSI schools will still be expected to develop a school comprehensive education plan, but that plan will no longer be submitted to the state education department. They do still have to go through the board approval process, and we'll go through our traditional process in developing them, but we are the final level of review for those plans. TSI schools also have to go through a district-led school review. The state will not be reviewing TSI schools. So that, again, that becomes a fully internal process. And that process has shifted a little bit. In the past, we've been allowed to bring school teams together to participate in that review process. The state has modified that, and so it is strictly just district-led school review with district-level staff who go in and work alongside the principal to review the school. They also must, a TSI school, select an evidence-based intervention and incorporate it into their school comprehensive education plan. So we were notified at our SED training last week that the school comprehensive education plan will be changing formats once again. I know, we get to a mastery kind of point and we have to start again, but they reassured us that they will have the template out in a timely fashion so that we can begin that work. However, we should note that the deadline for submission has been moved up as well. So instead of a July 31st submission to State Education Department is now July 1, which then pushes back the timeline for when our schools have to do this work. And you know how seriously we all take this work in trying to support them to develop an effective plan that they're going to implement. So we'll be thinking long and hard about how we want to do that work with them. And as we do right now, they are required to continue to survey parents, staff, and students as a part of that process. CSI schools have to follow a similar process, except that their SEP will be submitted to the State Education Department, and the State Education Department is committed to reviewing those schools each year that they are in status. And so they'll receive a full integrated intervention team review where they bring an outside educational expert and a state education representative along with the district rep to go through a review process. And I just finished a 3-day review with North Albany today, and one of the most significant changes is they're leaving with the schools quick wins for them to implement basically the next day or the next week, then some short-term recommendations and then long-term recommendations that will then inform their SEP progress, which is different from what the TSI schools have received. They will receive short-term and long-term recommendations that will inform their process. And actually, before I get to finish up with the CSI schools, all of our schools, because of our belief as a cabinet in the improvement process, will receive some level of school review. So even though we are in good standing and we are pleased with that, to have that removed from us, we recognize that we are on a path to continuous improvement. So we weren't waiting for the State Education Department to come out with their process to say, oh, we're going to continue to do this. Our schools knew we were coming and that we're going to do a review process because we have higher goals that we are looking to reach other than just the good standing status. So SEP, IIT, and then I think one of the most significant changes for the comprehensive support and improvement schools is the participatory budgeting process. So by 2019-20, the State Education Department is looking for our CSI schools to engage in some form of increasing student and parent voice and decision-making in the school. And one of the suggestions they presented to us was around participatory budgeting, where you allot a certain amount of money to a school-based project that the parents and the students of the school submit suggestions for, vote on, and then support the implementation of, so that they begin to take ownership in the school process. And as they went through a couple of other examples, you could do things, if you couldn't do the participatory budgeting, you could do things that increase the civic and college career readiness awareness, so establishing voter registration if you're a high school, like little different things that you could do to increase voice. But as they went through the different options, what clicked for me was a lot of the things that they were aiming to do are things that we can capture in our community schools model, using the needs assessment and the resources we're bringing there to bring in what our families need and what our students say they need. And so the State Education Department is open to suggestions for what other ways we can attack something similar to participatory budgeting and not have to create something new. And then last but not least, we have our receivership schools, which are being now identified as Cohort 2 receivership schools. So Sheridan Preparatory Academy and Giffen Memorial Elementary School will be Cohort 2 receivership schools. We are still awaiting for notification from the commissioner to identify the receiver. They were pretty explicit in our training last week that it's not automatically to the superintendent, although they assume that's what it will be. She does have the right to immediately assign an independent receiver. But they did not think that that would be something which you would be taking advantage of at this point in time. We are required to do a written notice for a public meeting 10 days before a meeting. That must be translated into as many languages as we can. We always aim for our top 5, but we'll probably do the languages specific to those schools to ensure that we have information for them. Our public notice meetings are scheduled for February 6th and February 13th, which Mr. Lesko did put out in our communication today. We will have to have translators available on site for that meeting. The community engagement team must be established within 20 days. Again, trying to think smart about what we already have in existence. We have a community advisory team that supports the community schools model. We are going to make the CET an extension of that team and build that right into the work so those things aren't seen as disparate as we try to wrap around that school. Receivership schools are still required to monitor, and actually they're supposed to revise and monitor their SEP this year. They will begin quarterly reporting for receivership next year. They will participate in a webinar in the coming weeks to determine their demonstrable indicators. So in addition to the metrics that Mr. Baker talked about for the identification process, the receivership schools will have at least 10 additional metrics that they are expected to monitor each year. 5 of which are chosen and selected by the state education department, and then an additional up to 10 selected by the school itself. So we've already begun work with our statistician to identify which metrics we are seeing the most growth in and will continue to see growth in, so that we are selecting the appropriate level 2 indicators. The receivership schools will not receive the traditional school review, either from the district or from the state education department. They receive what's called a demonstrable indicator review, and they will not receive one this year, which is a good thing because they haven't established any of the processes. We're starting this mid-year. However, once we identify our level 2 indicators and the schools select which tenant they will receive a review in next year, we will do a review of the school in that tenant in the spring at the district level so that they have some kind of baseline to work from. We have an option to open collective bargaining with the units to put things in place that will support what our improvement efforts are in that school. And we have an option to change staffing at receivership schools, and those are all things that we'll take into consideration as we go into this process. Michelle Bridgewater, our Director of School Improvement, and I have begun meetings with our receivership schools to lay out their timelines for meetings and making sure we're hitting all the deadlines we're supposed to, and to begin to brainstorm what changes they want to put in place, what budget impact those things may have, so that we can plan accordingly. So how do we get out? Exiting TSI or CSI status. So at elementary school, what we've been saying most simply is the 2 most important metrics are the academic performance, not progress, but performance, and the student growth. Those are the first 2 metrics that come up in the little formula they create for you. And if you get those 2 numbers to a level 2 or above according to the rubric, then you can exit status. If for some reason you're unable to get both of those numbers to that, then they look at all the other metrics in the status to be at level 2 or above. And the only difference for high school is instead of academic performance and student growth, it's academic performance and high school graduation rate. And so it's the same formula. You're looking to get those 2 numbers up to a level 2 or above, or to get all the other metrics to a level 2 or above so that you can exit from status. And as mentioned before, this is based on 2 years worth of growth, so it's something that you have to repeat 2 years in a row in order to exit status. So next steps. So I'll say quickly, as Mrs. Adams and I sat in the SED training last week, there were some schools who were new to the identification process. And I said to the presenter, be kind to our colleagues. It's a grieving process when you are first identified. And so you could hear the frustration with, well, we're just getting this information now. You know, how are we supposed to plan? What are we supposed to change? And I looked over to Mrs. Adams and I said, we've had our data since August. So school improvement starts the minute you have that information in front of you, because that's just what we're used to doing. So our next steps began back in August. And so we have always, for the last 3 years, progress monitored our SEPs. Our schools have adopted a model for which I'll give credit to Mrs. Gale at Sheridan Prep. They progress monitor monthly where they are with their SEP activities. We're working on really having them focus on not just the completion of the activity, but the impact of the activity before they get to the monitoring of the SEP. We have been in communication with our principals about their accountability status. We provided them with PowerPoints to then share with their staff so they can begin to explain the accountability and how the data will work and what next steps they'll need to take. We are drilling down into the individual data, particularly around chronic absenteeism, which is a new metric for us. I want to thank Mr. Baker and his office for developing a dashboard for chronic absenteeism so that we can monitor that effectively on a regular basis and intervene as appropriate. We continue to make the connection to our NWA growth data as a metric that becomes even more important as growth becomes a huge measure for the state. We continue to use common planning time to support best practices and to ensure that things that we are teaching teachers in PD then play out into the classroom targeted towards specific students. And finally, each newly identified target and CSI school received Title I improvement funds. I believe the amount that just came out was, I think it's only $25,000 this time around. In the past, it's been about $50,000. However, all of our schools in good standing will no longer receive that funding. So we are proactive, and we have reached out to those schools to identify those things that they would like to be carried forward, and we will make sure that those are incorporated into our budget presentation in the coming months. And I believe that is.
Thank you very much for consolidating 3 days of brain dumping from the New York State Education Department into a 15-minute presentation. That was pretty amazing. So we congratulate the district on the excellent work of moving so many schools to schools in good standing. That is fantastic, and we will continue to celebrate that while we also work very hard to help you move the district schools that are not in good standing to good standing. With that introduction, board colleagues, we're going to do one question at a time, so everybody gets one question before we go to the second question. Please prioritize your questions and ask the most important ones first, because I have a feeling there's going to be an awful lot of questions. So who would like to go first? Ms. Wilson.
Thank you for your presentation. And I also want to plus one your statement about we want to shoot higher than schools in good standing, because when I was reading, I was thinking I want to be a recognition school too. So absolutely, I
Can
agree
I just
with that.
jump in on that? I noticed in your first slide where you used the, it was like definitions, and you gave all the possible criteria. Could you just roll back to that first slide for 1 second? What's not on that slide?
That one. Recognition.
Okay, why doesn't recognition schools? It needs to be on the slide.
Oh, that's fine. My first question, I guess, is around it says new reports will outline how much each school is spending per student and from what source. And I'm curious if that overlaps at all, and it may be too soon to tell if that overlaps at all, what the governor stated the state address and his concerns about funds not being distributed to the poorest schools. So I don't know if that's something that we know or could understand at this time.
Bill, I'm probably going to defer to you in a moment, but hasn't some of that framework already been developed in terms of building-based budgets for schools and districts? And I think the governor's comments were more specific to following closely increases in aid and making sure that not just the district is the recipient, but those schools within a district who are in greatest need.
Okay.
So I think there are probably some parallels there, and certainly is not my domain of expertise at all. But Bill and I have talked a little bit about having to figure out how to track even building-based expenditures going forward, which is going to be a requirement that's new for the state.
Okay, so I'll tie it into a larger question about the targeted support and improvement schools. It says schools with subgroups that are among the lowest performing in the state, for example. And I noticed that they stated that we're going to improve improvement plans that are going to more or less allocate funds and such to that. So I was wondering if, when they said subgroups, and I know there's going to be Title I improvement funds, do we know those subgroups right now?
Do we know the subgroups for which we're identified?
That are among the schools with subgroups that are among the,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Who would like to be next? Ms. Lang.
So I have no questions. I feel like being on the board now for 3 years, we've gone through our SEPs, we've gone through the DSEPs, we've gone through the improvement, and so I'm so very thankful for the schools that have moved, and I know that that is that is because of all the work that you have been doing year after year, day after day. So I want to say thank you, and I also want to say that I have faith that Giffen and Sheridan, as well as the schools that were identified with the other category, I have full faith that we're going to get there. So I just want to say thank you and for the progress that we are doing. We see it, we see you, and I don't have any questions because I feel like we've had these questions and we're answering them and then we're continuing to move forward.
Anyone else? Ms. Krejci.
I would just like to echo what Ms. Lang said, that we do, I think, having also been on the board for 3 years, we recognize the work you're doing. We see the changes, both qualitative and quantitative, in the schools and the leadership, and we know that we're on track to where we need to be. So thank you, and let's keep going.
Anyone else? Ms. Alexander Mann.
It's just a comment. I believe that we're going to get there. I do. I know it's going to be. I know it's going to be challenging, but I do believe that we're going to get there. I'm looking at the schools that are in good standing, and I'm noticing among them are some of my favorite schools. Philip Schuyler, I think Arbor Hill Elementary is here. And so I believe that Giffen and Sheridan can move on up. And based on some of our conversation earlier, I am there's an opportunity having Myers as a CSI identified school. So that's just my comment there.
Anyone else? I have one very specific question, which I don't know if you have the data in your head enough to explain it to me, but North Albany was a school in good standing. What happened? I don't understand how that school, which as far as I could tell had fairly consistent progress, what was it that was uncovered by this new process that we were not seeing before?
So if you spoke with Principal Buff, she would always say it was 1 year where they had one really bad year, and they rebounded from that bad year, really well, and that was the year the identification came out. So the change in the system now is it's not 1 year of performance gets you identified. It's a collective performance over 2 years for the academics, and it's growth over 3 years now that will get you in the identification status. So they are looking at numbers differently. They also are calculating subgroup differently. So in the past, you had to have 30 students in that particular subgroup and at that grade level in order for that to count. Now, they count, so let's give a mathematical example. If I have 5 Latino students at 3rd grade, I count them for their ELA exam, that's 5. I count them for, and I might need 6. I count them for their math. I count them for their social studies. And then I count them again when they're in 4th grade. And then when I add that all up, I have a nice subgroup of a round number of 30. So they're going to get to, my math wasn't perfect, but they're going to get to those 30 students, even if you have 2 or 3, which is why we were sitting in the room with so many newly identified districts, because they are teasing
I'm sorry,
out
Dr.
those
Wilson-Turner.
subgroups.
I didn't understand that. Can you go back and say that again?
Yes.
How is 2 students 30 students? Like,
So
totally lost.
what they're doing is they're counting the student for every test score they input. So every time a child sits for a test, that counts toward the subgroup number. So I might need 10 students to get to 30, right? And in 2 years, however, if I only had those 5 Latino students, I had 15 in 3rd grade. Now they count again as 15 in 4th grade. I now have a 30 student subgroup. And so they're looking at data over time as opposed to that snapshot.
So let me ask a very big picture question about something that I wish I knew more about. In other areas of the law that I'm familiar with and other regulations I'm familiar with, there is a rulemaking process where rules are proposed and people impacted by those rules have the opportunity to comment on the development of the rules before the rules are formalized. No, I understand it's done for this year. I'm just trying to understand the process about which I know nothing.
No,
So did we have the opportunity to comment on these rules? So what I guess I'm saying is, as a board, this is a place where we need to step up. We need to be much more attentive to these rules when they're in the rulemaking stage. We need to be commenting on this because that is not reasonable. You have 15 students. You got 5 students who, for whatever reasons, have trauma in their life, and it puts the entire school into this standing. It just doesn't seem like a reasonable set of criteria when you have such a small cohort. And I don't know if I'm understanding exactly what you're saying correctly, but that's what I'm hearing is that it used to be a cohort of 30, now it's a cohort of perhaps 10 or 15, where we all know that statistics can be really radically changed by the challenges in 1 or 2 children's life when that happens. So I would like to see us take a larger view of that as the regions begin to work on this moving forward, and perhaps consider even, trying to preempt some of that as we work with in our board vision to have a larger influence on the New York State School Boards Association and other entities. It just seems like we should have been more advocating on the regulations, because we could have foreseen that this might happen in this case. So anything else
But what
I
I
should know?
will note about not to speak about one school, but to speak about North Albany's data as race, is they noticed their proficiency over time was going in the opposite direction. So even after they had that really good year, their overall proficiency did drop. And when we took 6th, 7th, and 8th grade out, that changed what their metrics looked like as well. So their middle school actually performed in a way that helped them as well. So their data has changed. They're at 4% proficiency for ELA and math. They are a school who needs to grow and improve. And I think Leslie has acknowledged that. And being a school in good standing, she's like, well, I'm not getting some resources that I know I need to continue to be able to grow. And so we endeavor to continue to treat her in a way that her data reflected, so we can continue to provide support. But that's the real reason for the change. And I do think looking at more than 1 year's worth of data is really important. I think looking at growth over time is really important. And so when you look at Sheridan Preparatory Academy, they last year saw the most growth they've seen in a very long time. So if they can maintain that for the next 2 years over time, there shouldn't be a reason they don't exit receivership.
Ms. Wilson. I'm sorry, wait, a couple of people haven't had a first question. Is there anybody who wanted to have a first question who hasn't? Okay, Ms. Wilson.
Another question about the absenteeism aspect of it is I noticed in the other sort of longer report from People Personnel that some schools, and there wasn't a big divergence from the rest, it was like 80, 92, and 92 among absenteeism with, I believe it was SPA, Giffen, and Arbor Hill. And I see that, Giffen and SPA are kind of like in this sort of, the overlap is there. So I don't know if the absenteeism was a big factor, but I know, and why I asked People Personnel the question I did was because I know people are always concerned with why the children are fighting, but I don't know if there's the same urgency about why they are in school. Is it that the parents at certain schools are dropping them off at the door, or, versus walking, and then if they're sick, they just let them stay. So I'm just curious about the nature of the research we do around that.
So at each of our buildings have an attendance committee, and one of the primary roles of our homeschool coordinator is to review the attendance data, determine which students have exceeded our attendance targets for them, and then to provide targeted interventions and support. So one of which is to, we do the daily parent phone calls, but to get to the bottom of why a student is absent, and if there are particular barriers that the school can assist with in getting the child to school. So I can't speak to specifics for each specific schools, but I do know that they do that work and have for years. And I think chronic absenteeism adds a different spin to that work, because you're not just looking at that global, we're at a 90% attendance rate for the building. You're now digging deeper into those individual students who are exceeding 10% of their enrollment time. So I think it's a different level of work that we're going to begin to do as we look at individual students who are struggling with their attendance.
Thank you for that.
I'll just add one other note that's worth, I think, people understanding is the state is blind to the type of absence when it comes to this metric. So excused, unexcused are considered absence. So that is I think, a different way of framing, the rates at which students, or why students aren't attending.
Anyone else have another comment? Ms. Alexander-Mann, do you have your hand up?
Well, this is the. Can you just repeat what you said?
He said it doesn't matter whether it's an excused absence or an unexcused absence. When they're calculating the 10%, I asked this question when I went to my ESSA presentation at the New York State School Boards Association. I made sure to ask this question because it seems ludicrous, right? So, for example, we've just been through this entire calendar conversation where we've decided that at least for this year, we're not allowing Eid as a formal day. Well, we haven't decided, but we've discussed the possibility of not having Eid off this year. So 200 students are going to have an absence that day. And if those students become ill, significantly ill, and they miss 2 weeks of school because they're ill, and their family takes them on a holiday for 4 days, that student is now chronically absent. And it doesn't matter that some of those days were sick and some of those days were religious observance. It does not matter according to these regulations, which, again, is a very questionable way to define chronically absent, but it is the way they've defined it. Who else has a second question? Vicki.
I just really wanted to, I think, echo, maybe it was Ann, but to thank you all. I've heard the ESSA presentations at the state, and but I have to say, Dr. Wilson-Turner, when you're talking, I see the flow of things, and I don't always see that when I've seen other presentations. And so all of you are very clear, and I'm just like, thank you, because obviously it's important that your leadership is going to make a difference in our schools' understanding of this and parents' understanding of accountability. So I just wanted to echo a thanks to all of you.
Can you break down for me one more time, because you were clear, but I still didn't get it, how we get off the list and what is the shortest time possible that one could get off the list? Because 2 years of data, 3 years of data, it sounded almost as if you're saying you can't get off the list for 3 years.
So
or
they
2
will not be
years?
doing new identification for 3 years. But it takes 2 years worth of data before they make that happen. So this year starts year 1. So they will look at the data from the 18-19 school year, the 19-20 school year, and then in 2021, they will let you know if you have exited status.
Okay, so
Did I get that
that's,
right? Okay.
they're going to take last year, no, this year,
This year.
18-19 and 19-20.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will not be taking anyone off of these statuses next year.
Correct.
But the following year, they will be reviewing people, so, okay.
So around this time in 2021, then we will know if we've come out of status.
Okay, and so no one will come off the list because of the in future years, it'll happen every year, but because it's sort of a breaking point of the new cycle?
No, I believe it's going to be a 2-year identification process always, because
Always?
in order to have that growth data, they need to have a certain segment of data.
Interesting. Okay, that's a very different model, that it's not, an annual review cycle. Anyone else have anything that they want or need to ask before we let our team go? Okay, thank you very, very much.
At this time, we'll have Mr. Hogan come forward to discuss the implications of the governor's speech, and we'll talk about what that means in terms of our budget process as we start those discussions. So thank you so very much, Mr. Hogan.
Okay, thank you. So the governor did release, as he typically does, mid-January, the state aid runs, which are a projection for the 2019-20 school year. There is a handout that we gave out at the beginning of the meeting. I'll just briefly tell you what this is. There were 2 board questions that came in today. The first table shows what the governor projects that we will be receiving this school year, which actually was the first set of numbers on the state aid run, and compares it to our current budget. And as that indicates, the projections of actual what we're going to receive this year are $3 million less than what our budget is. But it's actually in a couple areas. One is special services for BOCES, which is essentially non-component aid. And that's based on VOTEC courses and business courses. There's specific courses that specify. So that's something that we'll be looking into from the business office of why that changed. We obviously reported less students taking those number of courses. The aid drops proportionately. So we will be looking into that. That was 1.9 million of a reduction. It did bounce up in 1920 up to 3 million, so it did come back 400,000. You'll see in the new state aid runs. The other 2 areas where we took a loss are both special ed areas, high cost excess cost aid and private excess cost aid. Combined, that's about $571,000 less than our budget had projected. That's something we really don't need to worry about as much because that's an expense-driven aid. You get less aid if you have fewer special ed outplacements. So our expenses would have decreased as well. Even though the aid decreased, our expenses would have decreased as well. So that's not as concerning as the first one. And then the last item where there was a major change was building aid is about 1.2 million less than we had projected. That's another expense-driven aid. So everything you see on the governor's proposal even now, everything on there is a projection. The projections for what we're going to get this year, the projections for last year. Things change. Building aid is also an expense-driven aid. If we got less aid, we would have made less bond payments on capital projects. So that one I wouldn't worry about as much either. It's going to be proportional. The second question really asked about the universal pre-K, which is in the middle of the page. The governor had projected we're going to get 5.3 million this year. We had budgeted 3 million. That's about a $2.3 million increase. This is an item that actually shouldn't even be on the state aid runs. It's not in the general fund. It's actually, as soon as it shows up on the state aid run, the first thing we do is take it off and send it to a different fund called special aid where all the grants are. That's where we're required to keep track of it as per comptroller regulations. We didn't really have that big gain. You think we got a big gain, but we really didn't, because the 5.3 this year was spread between special aid fund and our general fund. The governor's run just plopped it all on one side. It's a left pocket, right pocket thing. We still have the same amount of money. We didn't gain any money. And you'll see in 1920, they're going to carry that 5.3 million over. It's a non-issue. It's the same amount of money. It's just two different pockets we're playing with. So don't worry about that piece either. There are some things you will worry about when I'm done, but that's not one of them, okay? So some of the highlights, I have it, all right. Total education increased 9.56 million, or 3.6% overall. That's an average. Foundation aid increased by 1.9%, but that included additional 50 million for community schools, which has restrictions on it. So when they say foundation increase 1.9%, that 1.9% is really inflated, because the community schools money is all restricted with special rules, and it's on a reimbursement basis. It's really treated as a grant. So the 1.9 number is really a smaller number than 1.9% for foundation aid. The community schools, that increased statewide 50 million. Equity in funding is a new theme, just like the ESSA presentation we recently heard. But there are a couple things in there that we want to keep track of. And the governors, for those of you that saw it, showed examples where Syracuse district as a whole got new money, but it didn't really translate into per pupil cost for the higher need schools. They may be getting $2,000 or $3,000 less, the highest need schools, as opposed to other ones. So this is all in alignment with the federal ESSA regs, where they want building by building reporting. The thing in here that really caught my eye was that he's proposing that designated schools devote a proportion of basically their increase in state aid to the highest need school. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what it does is it puts more restrictions on foundation aid. So let's suppose foundation aid increased by $2 million. Normally, we could use that $2 million to run the entire district. If the requirement now says half of it has to go to these 4 schools, there's only $1 million to run the other 14 schools. And they're going to have reoccurring expenses, operational costs, staff labor costs. So it is going to cause, just like community schools aid, it's going to be a restricted thing. And there's becoming more and more control at the state level as opposed to the local level. In reality, if they gave us the money and there's all this building by building reporting, we're going to distribute it. We're going to have to distribute it that way anyways, where the neediest schools get at least or more than other schools. However they define neediest schools, which is all those other statistics we have to go through. So that's just one thing I think we want to keep an eye on. The expense-driven aids, they want to merge 11 expense categories. This doesn't work. I mean, they did this in 2007, and they created foundation aid from what was, I think, before called instructional aid. But when they translate and merge these, their calculators don't work because the new foundation aid may be several $100 million less than the school districts were getting when it was broken up. So I fear that could kind of be this thing as well. In addition to that, these expense-driven aids now would be based on consumer price index and enrollment changes. And currently, they're expense-driven aids. If we have to spend an extra $1 million in special ed students, we get aid on that extra $1 million we had to spend. If it's CPI and that $1 million represents a 30% increase to us, under the new proposal, we might only get a 2% increase, even though mandated expenses increased by 30%. Same with, well, I don't think they would do this for the capital projects. It looks like they wouldn't. But transportation's another thing. We actually had the same bus company for over a decade at CPI. When we went out to bid, we knew that wasn't realistic anymore and that transportation costs were going to increase no matter who got it, just because the market was a lot different than what it was with CPI for 10 years. That's a type of thing we wouldn't have gotten additional aid. We would have been held to CPI. So long term, this would save the state an enormous amount of money. But this is something I think we would want to lobby and oppose expense-driven aids, and also give some thought to any restrictions, any further restrictions on foundation aid. Some other changes are here. Computer science ed, there's $6 million available. High student suspension rates, there's $3 million. They're available statewide. The property tax cap make permanent, that's not really a surprise. APPR reverting back to local measures instead of state test. The Assembly supports that. That's probably looking how that's probably going to go. The STAR exemption is interesting because statewide you keep hearing how New York State has the highest taxes in the country, but at the state level we're now proposing that you wouldn't be eligible at incomes between $250,000 and $500,000 for the STAR exemption. Currently you're eligible up to $500,000. So obviously this exemption is taken away from houses, that their property taxes are going to increase. So I thought that was interesting in light of the national discussions in the SALT change we've been subjected to. I just want to highlight one thing too. The governor's proposal, which you see the legislative run, the top set of numbers, again, are what the governor's projecting we're getting this year. The bottom set of numbers are what they're projecting for 1920. What we have to do as a school district is look at what they're projecting this year, but that's not as important to us in terms of budget impact and tax levy impact. We have to look at what our current 18-19 school budget is now, and based on the projections for 1920, what our budget will be a year from now. And that's what we measure, and that will determine the tax levy. So you'll notice on the slides, like here, we're showing the state aid proposal from the governor is the second column, and our actual budget is the third column. And that's where we're going to be moving from, the 18-19 budget into the new budget. So what this shows you is when you first look at our aid and you see it increased 6.1%, you're thinking, great, everything's looking really good. But you have to take out the universal pre-K, because as I explained, that's not general fund, that's going to a special aid fund, a different fund. So you have to take that out of there. So that $2.3 million was not a real increase. It was just giving to us from two funding sources. Now he's showing it on one printout instead of two different printouts. And then you have to set aside for community schools. There was over a $500,000 increase in community school aid, which is great. The problem is it's restricted money. It's not available to use district-wide. So that is restricted, and you have to spend the new money to get reimbursed the new money. So it's forced new spending. So you can't just take the new state aid and balance your new budget. You have to spend more money. And then, so that actually gets us to what's really available to us, which I'm calling unrestricted state aid for the general fund specifically. And even this doesn't look too bad. If you look at the net is a 3.9 increase of 3.74. If that's where it ended, that would be great, but you have to analyze every one of these numbers on the state aid run to see if there are implications to them, and in building aid, do some investigation to make sure it's correct. So the largest single increase we got was in building aid, which makes sense. We're building a high school. There's new projects coming online. We're still finishing up, closing out old projects. We have so many projects in this district, it's always moving. But that building aid, you're not going to be able to really use that for general operations. That's going to have to go toward bond payments. So when building aid escalates to this level, you will assume your bond payments are going to escalate even more than this, because we don't get 100% state aid on capital projects. So I think this number is inflated for building aid. I'm actually working with fiscal advisors right now. They take snapshots of certain things. We did already file our phase one, which was $51 million with the state. We won't be paying a lot of that money. We didn't go borrow it all in one lump. So I'm working with them. I think that number, we probably won't realize 14 million, but we're going to have to estimate our bond payments. So in essence, this will kind of take care of itself. If we got all that aid, our new bond payments would eat it up. If this is overstated, as I think it is, whatever our new aid is, it'll be proportionate in some level to the new bond payments. So that's not really available money, again, that we can pay current staff, enhance programs, etc. So when you do all of that and take all those considerations into kind of digest this thing, we're really looking at about $219,000 of available new aid that we can use any way we want, which of a district our size, this isn't much. This isn't going to do a whole lot. So I think we have some lobbying to do. I think what I will do next is look at how much money did the legislature add to us the last few years. I mean, there was a year or two they didn't add any because for whatever reasons they didn't, but they did the last couple years, and you know, as you know, both houses are Democrat now, so and actually all the lobbying organizations like school business officials, New York State school boards, even the Board of Regents have called for $2 billion increases in state aid, as opposed to this first run of the governor's proposal is a little under $1 billion of new aid. So the real number for statewide will probably be somewhere between 1 and 2 billion. I don't think we're going to see 2 billion, but it'll be more than 1 billion. So there's still a lot for us to do, but the state aid, there'll be a lot of analysis over that over the next couple of weeks to see what other implications there are. Maybe they can come up with some good implications. The concerns on funding I have right now are, as I mentioned, the building aid. I think that number's inflated, but we will look at that. If that's the real number, then my bond estimate payments are too low, and what I'm thinking right now for next year. So I will get that worked out. And then the change in special services, which is basically BOCES non-component aid. As I mentioned, we took like a $1.5 million reduction in that. So we're going to have to go back and look at what was filed the last 2 years and try to look at what areas decreased because that aid decreased. We're going to continue developing the 1920 budget. We're having some mega staff cabinet meetings right now, starting tomorrow. We're reviewing all of the submittals from all of the buildings and administrators of wants. And at the same time, our first draft budget is going to be due the next time we see you. So that will probably come like 2 days before the board meeting. The more time we have with it, the better it is. If we give it to you too soon, it's old news, because there's so much is at this stage of the game, so much is changing every day on that. We have to plan the 1920 community schools. There's new money there, as I mentioned. The academic plan is being worked on as well in the background. The submissions from the district staff I mentioned, and the plan to develop the first draft budget, which actually will just show you in a line item form a full shot of projected revenues and expenses by line item at this stage of the game. And again, the budget process, numbers change from now right up until you adopt it in early April. So with that, I will turn it over. It looked really great. The first 3 seconds I looked at it, and then when you look at the building aid piece, that was the biggest increase, and that's going to have a designation. So then it was looking a little less than certainly what I would have liked to have seen. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. You do not bring us good news, but I don't think anyone was very surprised. Some of the top level stuff was, once you get to the second, once you read through the numbers twice, you're like, oh yeah, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be. So we are not surprised by this, but it's still not as good a place as we've started the last few budget cycles. So board colleagues, questions. Who would like to ask the first question? Ms. Lang.
I just want to make sure that our current budget includes the APSTA contract and all of the new monies for that.
The new one will, the 1920, when we, in situations where we have contracts that aren't settled, we have to keep paying them the old contract. So we set up contingencies. So the money is in the budget, but we never really know in my office what it's going to settle at. So so there is money basically was set aside intended for those contracts, but when they settle at something different, obviously that's whatever the real numbers we have now, and those will all be in the 19 budget.
Let me ask Jen's question a different way, because I think I understand what she was trying to ask. She was asking, do we need to anticipate an increase in the budget purely to cover the new APSTA contract of the roughly 2%, or was that sort of engaged in the budget because you knew it was going to settle at the beginning of the year? We anticipated
Right.
that.
No, there will be additional, we will have to build in additional money for the new contracts.
Ms. Krejci, do you have a question?
Sure. I just wanted to confirm, because my recollection is the last few years, the actual final numbers have been much better than the initial runs, right? At least the last 2-3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So still,
Yeah, and
this is not great news, but
Yeah, and it should get quite a bit better. The only other thing, what I'm thinking is, we're not hearing anything. The legislature, the governor, and the state comptroller have not given statewide forecast on what the state budget looks like. So the state needs to, if they do projections and find out they're $4 billion worse off than they thought, that will hurt chances of obviously increasing these numbers. But typically both houses do their own projections, usually not till March. And then the comptroller weighs in at some point as well. So that's really what my hope for is, that we don't hear any bad news at the state level in terms of their fiscal situation.
Anyone else with a question? Ms. Wilson.
Thank you. I was just trying to understand in the formula, because it didn't seem like it was more or less allocated towards high need. Are they interpreting the burn rate through the funds that we've used before, and that's how they interpreted what we should be allocated this year?
Well, Albany there's several school districts like this, but the student population demographically is different or economically more challenged than the city as a whole. And there are places like this. If you look at a Lake George with all that $1 million lakefront, the kids that go to Lake George schools are not millionaires, generally. So in our situation, our wealth is inflated because we have a lot of white-collar jobs here, and so on paper, we're not as wealthy, I'm sorry, we're not as poor as Troy and Schenectady are significantly, have a different wealth factor, a lower wealth factor than we do. The last I looked, we were, like 1 is a statewide average, and I haven't looked at this in a couple years, but last time I looked, we were like a 0.71. Troy might be a 0.4, or Schenectady, I don't remember which one. One might be a 0.6. So on paper, and that's a problem for districts like us, and even, we're not gonna, other districts across the state can be in the same situation for totally different reasons. But Buffalo, for example, Syracuse and Rochester, they're considered pretty high poverty. And our kids that go to our schools are probably very similar to them. And that's an argument we've made, and the mayor makes on the city's behalf for their aid, saying if Buffalo's getting 80, 90, 80%, I think all those districts are getting 70 to 80% state aid of their budget. We're getting less than 50%. So we've made that, we make that argument. It makes no sense to us. Why isn't aid based on the students that are in your system? But they look at state tax returns, and they look at property wealth. And then they do a bunch of formulas to try to roll that into a wealth factor per student.
And it's more really about, because you can actually read all of this, it's on state aid, it's on the controllers, I think. You can find the actual formula. And it has to do with property wealth, and it's more about the ability of the community to absorb the cost than it is about the needs of the student. And there are some student-based needs, like the high needs, special ed reimbursements, and those kind of things. But in terms of how that overall formula works, it's about the perceived ability of the community to absorb the cost, which we know is then impacted by our 63% of property that is not taxable. So it all boils down to a difficult thing. Any other questions for Bill from board colleagues? Can you just clarify one thing you said about capital projects? In your slide, you've got capital projects listed as one of the 11 possible categories that would be buried into the merged area, but then in your verbal comments, you said you thought the capital projects would not be.
Right. There's new vague language, but what I did read, it really was talking about, there was like a 10%, there's currently another tier that was like an additional 10% of building aid, and it looked like they were only trying to manipulate that extra 10% tier, change that additional tier, not the baseline.
And that's building aid we don't use that.
Yeah, I don't think we get that 10%. The last I've looked, we haven't gotten that additional 10%. So it was another tier, different layer on top of the base building aid.
Because I recall this 2% thing was something that came up last year as well. It was part of the conversation at this time last year that the governor had proposed this 2% cap on expense-driven aid.
Exactly.
So I think I would like to propose to the Government Affairs Committee that they keep that on legislative priorities, because it's a really, really dangerous thing. It's really dangerous. It makes expense-driven aids no longer expense-driven, and I think we should try and keep that high on our list of things to fight, because it's really dangerous. Ellen, sorry.
I think not only, because that's a problem that affects not only us, but schools across the state. Maybe we were talking at one point about trying to come up with drafting a position statement for NYSBA, and that might be a really good one place to start.
I don't remember if they had that one in there last year. It seems like one that may have even been there. I can't remember. But yeah, absolutely, because this is one that's going to kill all districts. Other questions that people want to ask? I wanted to thank you for this. In particular, very helpful in understanding the mystery of how the state aid works.
Well, I want to apologize that I didn't have a up presentation. I would have preferred to have that, but
Ms. Smith, you look like you
what
still have
can
a
I do?
question. You're not done yet, Bill.
It's a governor's
Vicki
fault.
still has a question.
Actually, it was more of a comment to the board. Ms. Sturdivant, our clerk, did complete the membership to the Black Caucus of NYSBA. And there is a meeting coming up, and so I would just like to suggest we get our talking points together, also determine how many and who it can attend that meeting so that we can help push that body or work with that body to together lobby for some similar needs.
Yeah, I noticed the conference is on, or the meeting is on a Saturday. It's the larger part of a Saturday, so it's, I didn't realize that they did all that. Did they do all of their meetings during the weekend? Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Hogan before we let him go? Oh, I know, I had one more. I wanted to remind you that we talked about when the first draft budget comes forward, when there are significant discrepancies from last year's budget, either or both in dollar amount and percent, or percents with a minimum dollar amount. You were going to give us a one-sentencer on those so we don't have to ask?
Yeah, or I'll give you some summary table or something.
Something, yeah, just so that when there's a big change, we can understand it without having to ask. Great.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Hogan.
Okay, we'll have a better report later in the session.
Well, we do count on the Assembly to try
Yes.
and, although this year we can count on hopefully both the Assembly and the Senate to make some positive changes, so things could be looking up. Okay, so this brings us to board committee reports. Are there any committees that have a report? Government Affairs?
Okay. I just wanted to say that I spoke with NISBA about our transportation legislation. I sent an email to Assemblymember Fahey's office with McDonald and Senator Breslin asking them to attend one of our March budget meetings on the 7th or the 20th, I think is the date. I also spoke with Assemblyman Fahey's staff, Kathy, regarding our transportation legislation, child safety zones, and I need to meet with Ron. They would like us to actually draft that legislation and send it to them, but it does seem like they're interested at least looking at the legislation and possibly having a piece of legislation, so I think that's really good. And I attended the State of the State where I got to see Cuomo's budget live come in front of my eyes. And I think that is it. Thank you. And our next meeting, I think, is for March 2nd at 8 o'clock at Sheridan.
Ms. Krejci?
I didn't know if you wanted me next, or we also had a meeting, the Facilities Committee. Okay, so we had a meeting of the Wellness Committee yesterday. I'm the board representative or the board liaison to the Wellness Committee, and we spent the entire time discussing the food services RFP. Actually, I think it's a request for a bid, which is a different acronym. We have to put out a new request for a bid for the food services company at least every 4 years, or annually if there's a material change to the food services that we'd like. It's a huge undertaking on Lisa Finkenbender's part. It's about like a 75-page document with appendices, and then appendices on top of that. Pretty much she needs to specify every specific food item that the food service company will be giving us over the term of the contract. So she has to come up with a complete 21-day menu for every school for breakfast and lunch. It's very involved. And we were able, the committee members were able to learn about new food items and new directions that she's thinking on going, as well as some of the issues, sort of ongoing issues that community members or board members have been interested in, and some of the logistic hurdles to them. Just kind of highlights on that. One of the pushes is more protein options at breakfast and healthier breakfasts generally. There's been a new regulation that the pre-K students can't get sugary cereals for breakfast, so she's thinking of getting rid of the sugary cereals generally. Better, as I said, better protein at breakfast. Some of the questions, like we talked about salad bars. Salad bars are sort of difficult because it's difficult to make sure that students are getting the right portion size of the 3 out of 5 items that they need if they're selecting the items themselves. And people asked whether we would be keeping the old higher federal nutrition standards or going down to the lower new ones, and we will be keeping the higher ones except on milk. The lower standards will now allow 1% chocolate milk and not just skim chocolate milk, and she said it would probably be hard to find skim chocolate milk because of the new standards. Anyway, because this is a process where she will finish this 75 to 100 page document and submit it to state ed for approval, it's something where people who do have specific comments or concerns or new items they'd like to see added should provide input as soon as possible.
Okay,
And I turn the paper over. The other thing that we're going to add to this, we're going to ask the new vendor to qualify us for an incentive program that we get if we can source 30% of our food items locally.
Can I just ask one question? I know one of the things that board, a couple of times it came up both from public and board, was the styrofoam situation. Did that come up as part of the
That did come up as the discussion. That's not even as much an issue of what food company we go with, but more a question of only 2 of our schools have the type of commercial dishwasher where we can wash those trays. The new high school will have the type of commercial dishwasher and will have the setup where we can do that, but not all the schools are literally equipped to clean those trays.
And there's no non-styrofoam disposable option?
They are looking at that for breakfast. They're looking at like little cardboard trays or something like that. I thought you meant disposable versus reusable. They're looking at
No, I
things
meant
to-
non-styrofoam was, I think, what people were raising because Albany County had the styrofoam legislation. So they're only looking at non-styrofoam at breakfast? Is that what you said?
They mentioned specifically looking at cardboard type, they described them as cardboard type boat things for breakfast. And they talked about transitioning to reusable trays at certain schools and trying to upgrade as we can get commercial dishwashing equipment over time. She didn't specify looking for non-styrofoam at lunch, or she didn't specify specific options, but I know that that's a concern of hers and that's on her radar.
Great. When you come back from the next time you get the opportunity, if you could find out if even as, and I don't know if the contract RFP approach allows for this, but even as an ad alternate where we could choose, I'm sure it would cost more money to have non-styrofoam trays for other environments, for other schools. If that could be done as part of the RFP as an option for us, it'd be good to know.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, Ms. Smith.
Okay, great. Thank you. The Facilities Committee met this past Monday, and we had a kind of a robust meeting. I do want to just say right up front, we will have, I'm going to tell you our next 2 meetings are February 12th and March 19th at Academy Park. And those, again, will be some continuing discussions of what we talked about this past week. First of all, we received a high school status update from our general contractor. Looks like we are moving well now, staying within budget. The challenges that we faced the summer and the fall, we don't have those right now. Little cold weather, but you know, we're managing. And we spoke a bit about the rubber gym repair, all things that you've seen in the reports. There may be a few things coming, revisions coming our way regarding a plan for the tennis courts and a parent drop-off at the high school. So we'll be getting more information about what those things mean. The other thing is that we spoke quite a bit about the middle school reconfiguration capital project. We will be, we received an update on the North Albany Academy scope of work and also on the Arbor Hill scope of work. You will hear details on January 31st. I could make a really good joke about that right now. That's okay. But we will have a presentation on that middle school work at that time. And let's see, we spoke also about the 5-year capital facilities plan. That's going to be coming to you on February 14th. We have some additional, I think, information to provide you there, some of which I think did get included, but some additional cost things. So we'll be coming to you with that. The other thing we decided to do was to table just for this meeting, because we were already there at least an hour and a half, maybe 2, is we tabled the board, the facilities committee review of a few policies. I think there are 3 or 4 in particular that we will attend to, and we've got that on our next agenda item. And so I think Tabitha, Ms. Wilson, Ms. Roach, and I cannot say your last name.
Krejci.
Krejci, okay, thank you. Anything to add that you want? Good? Okay, so thank you very much. And staff, thank you.
Dr. Chatur.
The policy committee met last week, and we presented some of those items today. There's a bunch more that we discussed. They're all hopefully coming for the next few board meetings. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 6th of February at 5:30 at Academy Park. The next 2 months look like they're going to be busy.
Okay, I think we have now heard from all of the committee chairs, so there probably will not be any further committee reports. But is there any other business from board members? Ms. Lang.
Okay, this probably technically isn't business, but I did want to acknowledge ASH's presentation and the principal for their commitment to family engagement, the weekly SNN, the parent monitoring data and goals, and I also wanted to state that we received an SNN from ASH. As you know, all board members sign up for everyone's SNNs, and the principal set one of the best complimentary email to her students, who's ever on the SNN, about thanking them for having such a great field trip. And I thought that it was great that I did forward that on to the superintendent. So I just wanted to applaud their dedication to data, to parent engagement, and understanding metrics.
Any other business from board members? Then I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn the board meeting. Ms. Wilson, seconded by Ms. Smith, all in favor with 2 hands. That is more than unanimous.